Early in the morning at Harbor's Edge, a small town nestled along the California coast. There's an oddly serene vibe. The sun has just peaked over the horizon, casting soft golden rays on the shimmering water, while thick fog from Pacific lazily drifts through the cobblestone streets. Thompson's Diner sits right on the corner of Main Street, with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked apple pie wafting through the air, offering a warm welcome to anyone who steps through the old wooden door. Inside, a few locals, fishermen, postal workers, and an elderly woman with a hefty book are chatting animatedly, their laughter mingling with the clatter of dishes. Emily Carter sat alone at a table by the window, where she could watch the road leading into town and the exit behind the bar. Her casual denim jacket concealed her strong physique, and her brown hair was neatly tied back, revealing sharp yet melancholic green eyes. In front of her sat a cup of black coffee, steam curling up into the air, but she seemed oblivious to it. 20 years in the U.S. Navy, from covert operations in the Southeast Asian seas to sleepless nights on warships, had honed her into someone who remained vigilant, even as she had chosen Harbor's Edge to escape her past. Grace Thompson, the owner of the diner with her silver hair pulled back and a warm smile, approached with a coffee pot in hand. "You look more tired than those fishermen who just pulled in their nets last night, Emily," she said, her tone playful yet full of concern, pouring more coffee into Emily's cup. "I swear, if you keep staring at that cup any longer, it's going to start telling you its life story." Emily smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe I'm just waiting for someone to stir things up. So today isn't so boring, Grace." Her voice was light, but there was something sharp hidden beneath the playful facade. Grace chuckled, shook her head, and turned back to the counter to serve a customer who had just ordered more toast. No one in the cafe, including Grace, knew that Emily had once been a commander in the Navy, part of NAVSB CWRCOM, leading operations that would send shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned soldiers. She had come to Harbor's Edge 6 months ago, renting a small apartment above the diner, with a simple wish: to forget the nightmares of smoke and fire in the faces of comrades lost forever. But the habits of a warrior don't fade easily. She always chose a table by the window, kept a watchful eye on every car that passed by, and always carried a small dagger hidden in her jacket pocket, not because she wanted to use it, but because she knew that sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. The peaceful atmosphere was suddenly shattered by the roar of engines. 2 sleek black Harley-Davidsons, adorned with the coiled iron snake emblem of the Iron Vipers gang, thundered into the parking lot in front of the diner, the sound of their exhaust rattling the glass windows. Conversations inside the diner immediately fell silent. An old man near the bar muttered, "It's them again," while another person bowed their head over a plate of fried eggs, pretending not to notice. Grace stood behind the counter, gripping the coffee pot tightly, her smile fading away. Emily lifted her gaze from her coffee cup and looked out the window. 2 men stepped out of a car, strutting like they owned the whole town. The one in front, Eddie Rattler Malone, had a scarred face and narrow, dangerous-looking eyes. He wore a black leather jacket, one shoulder slightly bulging, a telltale sign of concealed weapon. Following him was Tommy Crusher Hayes, taller, with long hair tied back in a ponytail and a knife awkwardly stuffed into his boot. Both of them entered the bar, the sound of their spiked boots hitting the wooden floor echoing like a drumbeat signaling an impending storm. "Grace, my dear!" Eddie's voice rang out, loud and menacing, echoing throughout the bar. "Last night's dinner at the mayor's was a drag without you." He was really disappointed, and you know we don't like to see him upset. He flashed a twisted smile, stepping closer to the counter, slamming his hand down on the wooden surface, causing a few spoons to clatter to the floor. Grace set the coffee pot down, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained strong. "I'm busy with inventory, Eddie. A little shop like this doesn't run itself." She looked him straight in the eye, unwavering, even though anyone could see the beads of sweat on her forehead. Eddie tilted his head, his smile turning into a smirk. "Inventory check, huh? Sure. But, Grace, when the mayor calls a meeting, it's not really an invitation. He wants this town to grow, and he needs everyone to cooperate." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You wouldn't want to make things uncomfortable for us, would you?" Emily sat still, her eyes tracking every movement of the 2 guys. She recognized it immediately. Eddie had a handgun tucked under his left arm, a sign of a confident thug who was too lazy to hide it properly. Tommy was clumsier, the knife in his boot poking out every time he took a step. They were used to bullying others, but the way they moved showed they had never faced anyone who knew how to fight back. She took a sip of her cold coffee, her right hand gently resting on the table, close to the edge of her jacket. Grace took a deep breath, her voice ringing out stronger. Maybe the mayor should focus on managing the town instead of letting guys like you boss our people around, Eddie. As soon as she finished speaking, the atmosphere in the diner seemed to freeze. An elderly woman nearby dropped her fork, the sound of metal hitting the floor echoing in the heavy silence. Eddie squinted, his large hand reaching over the counter to grab Grace by the collar. "What did you just say to me, old lady?" he growled, pulling her closer to him. Tommy snickered, stepping up to stand beside him, clearly intending to make the situation worse. And that's when Emily took action. In the moment Eddie Rattler Malone grabbed Grace Thompson by the collar, time seemed to stand still in Thompson's diner. Grace's breath came out in weak gasps, her hands gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. But her gaze remained defiant. Tommy Crusher, Hayes, stood nearby, sneering, his massive shoulders shaking as if he were relishing the game they had played hundreds of times before, bullying innocent folks in Harbor's Edge until they bowed their heads. But this time, they had picked the wrong opponent. Emily Carter rose from the table by the window, her movements slow yet deliberate, like a leopard poised to deliver a lethal strike. The wooden chair creaked softly as she pushed it back, but the sound was drowned out by the thudding hearts of the onlookers. 20 years of experience in the U.S. Navy, from ambush nights in the South Pacific to one-on-one confrontations on the deck, now concentrated in every step she took. Her piercing blue eyes locked on Eddie, unwavering, as if she had seen hundreds like him and survived to tell the tale. "Let her go," Emily said, her voice soft yet sharp, echoing to the quiet of the diner. It wasn't a request. It was a command, the kind of command she had once shouted amid the blast of bombs and the roar of crashing waves. Every eye in the diner turned toward her, from the elderly woman with a book that had fallen onto the table to the waiter gripping his tray tightly. Grace looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't say a word, as if she sensed something was about to unfold. Eddie turned around, his hand still gripping Grace's shirt tightly, the twisted smile on his scarred face now morphing into a grimace of annoyance. "Who the hell do you think you are, girl?" He let go of Grace, shoving her back against the counter, then strode toward Emily, each step making the wooden floor creak beneath him. Tommy followed closely behind, his right hand lightly brushing against the knife in his boot, clearly ready to do whatever Eddie commanded. Emily stood still like a statue, but in her mind, everything was calculated. 20 feet of distance between her and Eddie, 3 seconds for him to get close enough to strike, a weakness in his right wrist, where he was raising it as if to threaten her. She had faced far more dangerous foes than this, ones trained to kill rather than just bully, and she knew that sometimes the best way to take down a beast was to let it run straight into the trap. "Let her go. I'm only saying this one last time," Emily repeated, her voice now colder, like the winter wind sweeping across the Arctic Sea. Eddie stopped a few steps away from her, his narrow eyes squinting. Then he let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "Who do you think you are? You think you can teach me how to behave all by yourself? Tommy, take care of her." Tommy stepped forward, awkwardly pulling a knife from his boot, the steel blade glinting under the dim light of the bar. But before he could raise his hand, Emily sprang into action. With a speed that only years of grueling Navy training could provide, she leaned to the left, her right hand grabbing Tommy's wrist and twisting it at a precise angle that made him scream in pain. The knife clattered to the floor, and before Tommy could react, she spun around and slammed her elbow into his temple. Tommy dropped like a sack of potatoes. Unconscious in an instant, Eddie roared, charging toward Emily, his left hand drawing a handgun from beneath his coat. But he was too slow. Emily had anticipated the poorly concealed grip of the gun tucked in his sleeve, which had betrayed him the moment he walked in. She ducked low, dodging the imaginary bullets, then lunged forward, her left hand locking tightly around Eddie's wrist that held the gun, while her right fist drove straight into his elbow. A sharp crack echoed as Eddie's joint dislocated, the gun clattering to the floor and sliding across the nearby table leg. He howled in pain, but Emily didn't let up. She increased the pressure on his wrist, forcing him down to the ground, his scarred face now twisted in agony and shock. 3 choices, Emily said, her voice steady, as if she were reading the breakfast menu. 1, you and your buddy get out of here right now, and we forget this ever happened. 2, you try something stupid, and I'll send both of you to the emergency room. 3, she tightened her grip, making Eddie groan. I'll count how many bones I can break before you pass out. Choose. Eddie gasped for breath, sweat streaming down his forehead. You have no idea who you're messing with, he growled, but the initial confidence had faded. Emily smiled, a smile that was anything but warm. Oh, I know exactly who you are, Eddie Rattler Malone. Kicked out of the Navy in 2018 for violent behavior. Now you're a lackey for the Iron Vipers, bullying innocent folks in Harbor's Edge to make some dirty cash. Am I wrong? The color drained from Eddie's face, his eyes wide with shock. Tommy, still lying motionless on the floor, let out a faint groan. Grace, now standing upright behind the counter, looked at Emily with a gaze that was both astonished and grateful. Who are you? She whispered, her voice trembling. Emily pulled her hand away from Eddie, taking a step back but still keeping a ready stance. I've just seen enough bullies like you guys in my life, she replied, picking up her cold coffee cup and taking a sip as if nothing had just happened. Eddie stumbled to his feet, dragging Tommy along, both of them backing out the door with a mix of anger and panic in their eyes. This isn't over, Eddie growled before disappearing into the parking lot, the roar of a Harley-Davidson engine roaring to life as they sped away. The restaurant was enveloped in silence for a long moment. Then a hesitant round of applause broke out from an elderly woman nearby, followed by cheers from the other patrons. Grace stepped closer to Emily, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, she said, her voice choked with emotion, but I'm afraid you just painted a target on your back. Emily looked out the window, where the silhouettes of 2 motorcycles faded into the fog. Maybe so, she whispered, but sometimes peace has to be fought for. She knew Eddie was right. This wasn't over. And she also knew that the peaceful day she had been searching for at Harbor's Edge had just officially come to an end. After the roar of the engines from Eddie, Rattler, Malone, and Tommy Crusher, Hayes Harley-Davidsons faded into the thick fog of Harbor's Edge. The atmosphere in Thompson's diner gradually returned to a normal rhythm, though it wasn't exactly peaceful. Whispers began to swell among the patrons, like tiny waves rippling on the surface of the sea before the real storm hit. An elderly woman with a hefty book peered at Emily Carter over her glasses. With it slipped down her nose, her gaze a mix of curiosity and admiration. The waiter, still clutching his tray of food, leaned in to whisper to a nearby fisherman, "What the hell does she do that so fast?" But Emily paid no mind to the stares or the murmurs. She settled back at a table by the window, cradling a cold cup of coffee, her sharp blue eyes fixed on the now empty main street. Grace Thompson stepped in, holding a freshly brewed coffee, her hands no longer trembling, but her face still showed clear signs of worry. "Are you okay, Emily?" she asked, her voice dropping as if afraid someone outside might hear. She poured coffee into Emily's cup, the steam rising like a small comfort amidst the chaos that had just unfolded. "I've never seen anyone handle those Iron Vipers so quickly. I swear, I thought they were going to smash this place to pieces before you even got up." Emily took a sip of her coffee, the bitter taste sliding down her throat like a way to pull her back to reality. "I'm fine, Grace," she replied, her voice soft yet firm. "I just can't stand watching others get bullied." She set the cup down, her right hand lightly brushing against the edge of her denim jacket, where a small dagger still rested in the pocket, a habit from her days on the battleship, when every second could mean the difference between life and death. Grace sat down across from her, her experienced brown eyes locking onto Emily's. "You're not just an ordinary client, are you?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and caution. "I mean, the way you twisted Tommy's arm and then made Eddie kneel. I've lived in Harbor's Edge for 40 years, and I've never seen anyone pull that off of the Iron Vipers." Emily smiled faintly, a smile tinged with nostalgia, and a hint of sadness. "I used to have a job that required a bit of agility," she said, not delving into details. But her gaze drifted, as if she were looking to the fog outside to revisit the days gone by, those days when she stood on the deck of the USS Cole, leading a Special Forces team through treacherous waters, or the freezing nights in Singapore, where she lost 2 teammates in a failed operation. 20 years in the U.S. Navy, most of it tied to NAVSB CWRCOM, had turned her into a fighting machine, but also left scars that no one could see. "I came here to find peace," Emily continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Harbor's Edge has something tranquil about it. No blaring sirens, no gunshots, just the sound of waves lapping the shore and the smell of Grandma's apple pie. "I thought I could leave the past behind." She paused, her fingers lightly tapping on the edge of her coffee cup. "But maybe the past isn't ready to let me go just yet." Grace tilted her head, her gaze gentle yet sharp, like a mother who sees right through her child's heart. "You know, Emily, I once thought Harbor's Edge was a place to escape. My husband passed away 15 years ago, leaving behind his bar and a mountain of debt. I stayed because I didn't want to give up the last piece of him. But then the Iron Vipers showed up, starting to threaten the townsfolk, forcing the shops to pay for protection. I tried to pretend I didn't see it, but today," she paused, taking a deep breath, "today, you reminded me that sometimes you can't just keep running away." Emily looked at Grace, a silent sense of understanding blossoming between the 2 women, one who had faced war, and the other who fought the small yet fierce battles of everyday life. "You don't have to hide," Emily said, her voice now carrying a rare warmth. "Not when you have people ready to stand up for you." Grace smiled, but that smile quickly faded as she looked out the window. "I'm just afraid that after today, they won't leave us alone. Eddie might be a tough guy, but he doesn't act alone. The Iron Vipers have someone backing them. And then there's Mayor Grayson. He meets with them every week at the club by the harbor. I've heard they're up to something much bigger than just bullying a few small restaurants." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she looked out at Main Street, now shrouded in thicker fog. Grace's words awakened a part of her, the warrior, who used to analyze every detail, who meticulously planned campaigns where a single mistake could cost the entire team their lives. "I've noticed a few things, too," she said, her voice dropping. "Eddie's hiding a gun under his jacket, but he doesn't know how to conceal it well. Tommy's clumsy with a knife. They rely more on scaring others than on actual skill. If they have someone backing them up, that's the real problem we need to worry about." Grace furrowed her brow, her hand gripping the coffee mug tightly. "What do you mean? Do you think they'll come back?" "Sure thing," Emily replied without hesitation. "But this time I'll be ready." She stood up, pulling her coat tighter around her, her eyes scanning the now quiet diner. "Thanks for the coffee, Grace. Keep this seat warm for me, will you? I have a feeling I'll be back soon." As Emily stepped out of the cafe, the chilly morning air of Harbor's Edge wrapped around her. The distant sound of waves crashing served as a reminder that she couldn't run away forever. The power she had once kept hidden, the very thing she hoped would stay dormant in this small town, had now awakened, and deep down, she knew that her confrontation with Eddie and Tommy was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Emily Carter stepped out of Thompson's diner, the chilly morning air of Harbor's Edge wrapping around her like an unwanted embrace. The sound of waves crashing from the beach half a mile away echoed steadily, blending with the wind whistling through the pines lining Main Street. She pulled at the collar of her denim jacket, her left hand lightly brushing against the dagger hidden in her pocket, a habit from her days on the warship, where anything could become a lifeline weapon. Thick fog still enveloped the town, obscuring visibility beyond a few hundred feet, but Emily didn't need to see clearly to sense that something was shifting. The confrontation with Eddie and Tommy wasn't just a random incident. It felt like a warning shot, awakening the warrior within her that she had tried to bury for the past 6 months. She climbed the creaky wooden stairs leading up to the small apartment above the diner, each step groaning under the weight of her heavy boots. The apartment was a mere 400 square feet, a combined living room and kitchen, a sleeping nook with a single bed, and a window overlooking Harbor's Edge. The decor was starkly simple: an old wooden table, a few books on naval tactics, and a vintage radio that Grace had given her when she moved in. This wasn't home. It was a refuge, a place where she hoped to erase the nightmares of smoke and the final screams of her comrades from the Singapore campaign 8 years ago. Emily settled into the armchair by the window, cradling the coffee cup that Grace had prepared for her. The warmth from the cup spread through her palms, but it wasn't enough to chase away the chill deep inside her. She closed her eyes, allowing memories to wash over her like an unstoppable wave. 20 years in the U.S. Navy, from a passionate young sailor to commander of NAVSBCWERCOM, had forged her into someone who never backed down. She had led a special forces team to the waters of the Philippines, dismantling human trafficking rings, and had stood on the bow of the USS Gettysburg in a Category 10 storm, shouting commands over the howling wind. But Singapore was a wound that would never heal. A failed intelligence operation, 2 teammates, Jackson and Lopez, lost in her hands because of a traitor she hadn't seen coming. After that day, she retired, leaving everything behind to seek a peaceful corner at Harbor's Edge. But peace, it turns out, isn't something easily attained. Grace's words about the Iron Vipers and Mayor Grayson kept echoing in her mind. They're up to something much bigger. If that's true, then Eddie and Tommy are just the tip of the iceberg. Emily stood up, set her coffee cup down on the table, and walked over to the small wooden box hidden under her bed. Inside was the only thing she had brought from the Navy, an encrypted satellite phone, the kind Nav Spectracum used for covert operations. She had sworn never to use again, but now, her finger glided over its cold surface, hesitating. She powered on the device, the screen lighting up with a small beep. A few old contacts appeared, including Daniel Hawk Reynolds, the last surviving teammate from the Singapore operation, now working for the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. If anyone knew about the Iron Vipers or any shady activities along the California coast, it was Hawk. She pressed the call button, her heart racing a little faster as the signal connected. "Carter?" Hawk's voice crackled through the speaker, rough yet filled with surprise. "I thought you had disappeared from the grid a long time ago. Where are you calling me from?" "Harbor's Edge," Emily replied, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "A small town in California. Hawk, I need you to look into a guy named Eddie Rattler Malone from the Iron Vipers. He just stirred up some trouble here, and I have a feeling it's not just some silly bullying." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Hawk sighed. "You can't stay retired for long, can you? Iron Vipers, huh? I've heard of them. They're not your typical biker gang. They're tied up in smuggling operations through the port from San Diego to Oregon. Malone is just a pawn. Emily, if you poke at him, you might be stirring up something much bigger." Emily nodded, even though Hawk couldn't see her. "I think so, too. Is there anything else about them?" "It seems like the local mayor, Grayson, is getting involved as well." "Grayson?" Hawk murmured, as if searching his mind. "Let me dig deeper." "But Emily, listen, if you're right, then Harbor's Edge might be sitting on a ticking time bomb. I'll send the information through a secure channel in 48 hours. And you, be careful, you don't have the support team you used to anymore." "Thank you, Hawk," Emily said, then hung up. She stood still by the window, looking down at the harbor through the fog. The small fishing boats bob on the waves, their lanterns hanging from the decks flickering like lost stars. But inside her, a familiar feeling stirred the feeling of a warrior knowing that the battle had begun, whether she wanted it to or not. She turned back to the table, her hand resting on the naval strategy book. "If they want to fight," she whispered to herself, "then I'll show them I've never really retired." The power she had kept hidden, the strength she once used to protect hundreds, was no longer dormant. It had awakened, and Harbor's Edge would be the place where it shone. The morning fog at Harbor's Edge gradually lifted as the sun climbed higher in the sky, leaving behind glistening droplets on the rooftops and sidewalks along Main Street. Inside the small 400-square-foot apartment above Thompson's Diner, Emily Carter sat at an old wooden table, the encrypted satellite phone resting silently in her hand. The brief call with Daniel Hawk Reynolds still echoed in her mind, his warning that the Iron Vipers were not just a local biker gang, but part of something bigger, something far more dangerous. She set the device down, her gaze drifting to the window, where small fishing boats lazily departed the harbor, their deck lanterns flickering weakly in the daylight. But the tranquility of that scene was now just a fragile facade, concealing the turmoil quietly unfolding beneath the surface of this small town. Emily stood up, pulled her denim jacket tighter around her, and stepped out of the apartment. She needed fresh air. She needed space to think. The wooden stairs creaked under her boots as she made her way down, but the noise didn't startle her. 20 years in the U.S. Navy had taught her how to listen for the important sound of soft footsteps sneaking through the night, the metallic click of a gun being cocked. The creak of the stairs was just par harbor's edge, like the waves crashing half a mile away or the seagulls calling out in the sky. As she stepped out onto the street, Grace Thompson was standing in front of the shop, holding a broom to sweep the sidewalk. She looked up, a faint smile appearing on her wrinkled face. "Can't sleep, Emily?" she asked, her tone teasing but her eyes filled with concern. "I swear, after what happened this morning, I can't sleep either." Emily paused, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, where the small dagger lay still. "It's not that I can't sleep," she replied, her voice low. "I'm just thinking about what you said regarding the Iron Vipers and Mayor Grayson. If they're really up to something bigger, then what happened this morning wasn't just a coincidence." Grace stopped sweeping, leaning on the broom handle, her brown eyes fixed on Emily. "I've lived here for 40 years, you know? Harbor's Edge used to be a peaceful place where fishermen went out to sea. Kids played on the sand, and no one locked their doors at night. But in the past few years, everything has changed. The Iron Vipers showed up, starting to pressure the shops for protection money. Then Mayor Grayson held secret meetings at the club by the harbor. No one knows exactly what's going on, but everyone has seen strange trucks driving around at night." Emily nodded slowly, her green eyes squinting as she looked toward the harbor, about 2,000 feet away through the narrow streets. "Did you hear anything specific about the trucks or what they're doing?" Grace shrugged her shoulders, her voice dropping as if afraid someone might overhear. "Not much. But last week Jimmy, the paper boy, told me he saw a few large crates being unloaded at the dock in the middle of the night. No labels, no paperwork, just a bunch of Iron Vipers standing guard. He was so scared, he ran straight home. I told him not to tell anyone, but now that I think about it," she paused, taking a deep breath, "maybe I should do something instead of just pretending I didn't see anything." Emily placed a gentle yet firm hand on Grace's shoulder. "You did the right thing by telling me," she said, "and you don't have to face this alone. I'll dig deeper." Her words carried a silent commitment, not just for Grace, but for herself as well. The confrontation with Eddie, Rattler, Malone, and Tommy Crusher, Hayes this morning had awakened a part of her she had hoped would stay buried forever. Now, there was no turning back. She left Grace and walked down Main Street toward the harbor. The sea breeze picked up as she got closer to the dock, carrying the scent of salt and engine oil. Harbor's Edge wasn't large, just a few wooden piers stretching about 300 feet, some old warehouses, and a gravel parking lot where a few pickup trucks were parked haphazardly. But today, something felt different. A black truck with no license plates was parked near warehouse number 3, its back door slightly ajar. Two men in leather jackets, sporting the Iron Viper's Iron Snake emblem on their shoulders, stood nearby smoking, their low voices drifting in the wind. Emily stopped, crouching behind a rusty shipping container about 50 feet away. She observed, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. A guy with a handgun tucked under his jacket, just like Eddie. The other one held a walkie-talkie, constantly scanning the area as if waiting for something. Then the warehouse door swung open, and a third man stepped out tall, silver-haired, dressed in a black suit that fell out of place in the port atmosphere. He said something to the other two, his voice loud enough for Emily to catch a few words. "Grayson wants a shipment moved before Wednesday, no delays." Emily's heart raced faster. Grayson, the mayor of Harbor's Edge, not only knew about the Iron Vipers, but was directly involved. She crouched low, backing away from the container, her mind starting to piece things together. Eddie and Tommy weren't acting randomly this morning. They were sent to threaten Grace, possibly because she knew too much. And if Hawk was right, then the Iron Vipers weren't just a local gang. They were part of something bigger, a conspiracy that could turn Harbor's Edge from a peaceful town into a hub of crime. She turned back, hurrying toward Thompson's diner, her hands clenched tightly in her coat pockets. As she pushed the door open, Grace looked up from the counter, her expression worried. "What's wrong, Emily? You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's not a ghost," Emily replied, her voice dropping, filled with determination. "It's something even worse." "I need to borrow your phone, Grace. There are a few things I need to confirm right now." She knew that from this moment on, Harbor's Edge was no longer her sanctuary. It had turned into a battlefield. Emily Carter stood in front of the counter at Thompson's diner, her breath a bit ragged after the quick trip back from Harbor's Edge. The dim yellow lights in the diner cast a glow on her face, highlighting her blue eyes, which now sparkled with steely intensity. Grace Thompson set the old, tangled landline phone down on the counter, its twisted cord resembling a jumbled mess, and stepped back, her hands gripping her apron tightly, as if trying to steady herself. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If you're right about this, we're poking a hornet's nest." Emily nodded, her hand lifting the receiver without a moment's hesitation. "I'm sure," she replied, her voice low but filled with determination. "I've seen enough at the docks to know this isn't just a bunch of bikers looking to stir up trouble. If we don't act, Harbor's Edge won't be home for you or anyone else here." She dialed number, her fingers moving swiftly over the keypad, calling back Daniel Hawk, Reynolds, through a secure line he had sent after their last call. The phone beeped twice before Hawk's hoarse voice replied. "Carter, you called back so quickly? Is something going on over there?" he said, his tone laced with a hint of worry, as if he had already sensed something was amiss. "Hawk, I just arrived at the dock," Emily said, her voice lowered so only Grace could hear. "There's an unmarked truck, a few Iron Vipers keeping watch, and a guy in a suit. I heard him mention Grayson. He said something about moving the shipment before Wednesday. Do you have any intel on Grayson yet?" On the other end of the line, Hawk sighed, the sound heavy like the wind blowing across the night sea. "Mayor Grayson, huh? I just dug up some pretty nasty stuff, Emily. William Grayson, 52 years old, has been the mayor of Harbor's Edge for 8 years. His public record looks clean, but the DI has an internal report from 2 years ago. He's been taking money from a shell company in San Francisco, linked to arms smuggling to the small ports along the West Coast. Iron Vipers are their muscle here. Malone and his crew are just the tip of the iceberg. The real mastermind could be someone much bigger." Emily tightened her grip on the receiver, her heart racing as each piece of the puzzle fell into place. "A bigger name," she repeated, her voice dropping. "Who do you think it is?" But in her mind, one name flashed. Marcus Kane, an international smuggler she had once pursued during the Singapore operation. He was a ghost in her memory, the one behind the ambush that left Jackson and Lopez dead. If Kane was truly involved, then Harbor's Edge was facing not just a biker gang, but a transnational crime empire. "I'm not sure," Hawk replied, "but I'll send the data through the encrypted channel within 24 hours. Emily, listen, if Grayson and the Iron Vipers are working for someone like Marcus Kane, then you're stepping into a dangerous game. You don't have a special ops team backing you anymore." "I know," Emily said, her gaze drifting over to Grace, who was looking at her with a mix of fear and trust. "But I can't just stand by and watch this town fall into their hands. Send me everything you got. Hawk, and thank you." She hung up, placing the receiver down on the counter with a soft click, like the final punctuation mark on the piece she had once sought. Grace stepped closer, her voice soft yet firm. "What are you planning to do, Emily? If they're that strong, then you alone." "Not alone," Emily interrupted, a faint smile appearing on her lips for the first time that day, bringing a hint of warmth. "You stood up this morning, Grace. That's a start. And if I'm right, there are more people at Harbor's Edge ready to fight than the Iron Vipers think." She turned to walk toward the door, but paused when Grace called out to her. "Emily," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Be careful. I don't know who you were before, but I know you're a good person. Don't let them take that away from you." Emily nodded, not looking back. I won't let them take anything that doesn't belong to you. That doesn't belong to this town. She pushed the door open, the cold sea breeze hitting her face. Through the dissipating fog, she could see the distant outline of the harbor where a dark scheme was brewing. Eddie and Tommy were just pawns. Grayson was a rook, but the one controlling the board cane was the real target. The afternoon at Harbor's Edge drifted by in a heavy atmosphere, as if the thick fog rolling in from the Pacific was carrying a warning. After her call with Daniel Hawk Reynolds, Emily Carter couldn't sit still in her tiny 400-square-foot apartment above Thompson's Diner. Hawk's words echoed in her mind. The Iron Vipers weren't just a local biker gang, and Mayor Grayson was part of a larger conspiracy that might involve Marcus Kane, the man who had cost her 2 teammates in Singapore. She slipped on her denim jacket, tucked a dagger into her pocket, and descended the creaky wooden stairs, each step creaking like a countdown to a battle she knew she couldn't avoid. As Emily pushed open the diner door, Grace Thompson was wiping down the counter, her hands moving slowly as if she were trying to keep everything under control. The place was nearly empty, with just an old man sitting in a far corner, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. Grace looked up, her brown eyes filled with worry. "Where have you been, Emily?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with tension. "I saw a few motorcycles pass by this afternoon. They weren't Iron Vipers, but I didn't like the way they were looking around." Emily paused, her hand gripping the doorknob tightly. "Not the Iron Vipers?" she asked, her blue eyes narrowing. "What's their emblem like?" Grace shrugged her shoulders and set the cloth down on the counter. "I can't see very clearly. The fog is too thick. But it looks like some kind of bird, silver in color." They didn't stop, just glided past slowly, as if they were scouting around. Emily nodded, her mind starting to analyze the situation. Another biker gang at Harbor's Edge could complicate things or open up an opportunity. "I'll go check it out," she said, her voice low. "Grace, lock the back door, and don't let anyone accept me. If Eddie or Tommy come back, call me right away." She handed Grace a slip of paper with her satellite phone number on it, then stepped outside. The biting cold air hit her face as she walked down Main Street, heading toward the harbor about half a mile away. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and engine oil, mingling with the rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the shore. She maintained a steady pace, her boots tapping lightly on the cobblestone sidewalk, but her eyes were constantly scanning every corner, every parked car along the street. As she got closer to the harbor, the sound of a motorcycle engine echoed from afar, not the aggressive roar of the Iron Vipers, but a deeper, steadier sound, like that of a well-trained formation. From the fog, 5 motorcycles emerged, gliding slowly down the road, leading to the parking lot at the port. The badges on their leather jackets glinted faintly in the dim light, a silver hawk spreading its wings, sharp and powerful. Silver Hawks, Emily thought, the name flickering in her memory from old Navy intelligence reports. Not your typical gang of criminals, but rather former military personnel, mostly from the Marines and Special Forces, gathering to protect their territory. If it really was them, then their presence at Harbor's Edge was no coincidence. The leader, a tall guy with short salt and pepper hair and broad shoulders like a wall, stopped his bike about 30 feet from Emily. He took off his helmet, revealing a rugged face with a scar running from his eyebrow down to his cheek. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deep and gravelly, but not threatening. "I saw you watching the Iron Vipers at the warehouse this morning. You're not from around here, are you?" Emily stood still, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, ready to pull out a knife if necessary. "I'm the one who lives here," she replied, her voice calm yet sharp. "Who are you, and why do the Silver Hawks care about the Iron Vipers?" The man sneered, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Stone," he said, stepping out of the car and approaching, but keeping just enough distance to avoid any tension. "We don't care about the Iron Vipers. We care about what they're bringing through this port. Military weapons, not cheap toys. They're encroaching on our territory, and I don't like that." Emily tilted her head, her eyes locking onto Stone. "Military weapons?" she repeated, her voice dropping. "Do you have any proof?" Stone nodded, pulling out a distant photo from his jacket pocket of an open shipping container in the port. filled with AR-15s and grenades clearly not civilian goods. "My guy snapped this last night," he said. "The Iron Vipers are working for someone bigger, could be Grayson. Could be the one pulling his strings. What do you know about this?" Emily held the photo, her fingers gliding over the surface of paper. Hawk's words about Marcus Kane echoed in her mind a transnational smuggling empire, and Harbor's Edge could be a crucial link. "I know enough to understand that they're not just about bullying the people," she replied. "But I'm not sure you and the Silver Hawks can be trusted." Stone shrugged, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "You don't have to believe me, but if you want to stop the Iron Vipers, you'll need someone who knows how to fight. And we used to be soldiers, not thugs like Eddie Malone. Think about that." He turned back to the car, signaling the Silver Hawks to pull back, the engine's roar fading into the fog. Emily stood still. The photo in her hand felt like a challenge. The Silver Hawks weren't enemies. They could be allies. But to take down the Iron Vipers and the one pulling the strings, she needed more than just a group of veteran bikers. She headed back to Thompson's diner, her mind racing to map out a plan. An unexpected alliance was taking shape, and Harbor's Edge would be where it all began. Emily Carter hurried down the foggy main street. The photo Stone had given her clutched tightly in her hand. The image of the AR-15s and grenades in the Iron Viper's warehouse was a chilling confirmation of her suspicions. Harbor's Edge wasn't just a target of a local biker gang, but a link in a much larger smuggling network. The sound of the waves crashing from half a mile away synced with her heartbeat, each thump a reminder that time was running out. As she pushed open the door to Thompson's diner, a small bell jingled, shattering the quiet atmosphere inside. Grace Thompson looked up from the counter, her hands pausing in their task of wiping down the coffee mugs as she noticed a tense expression on Emily's face. "Did you find anything at the docks?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. The old man in the corner of the cafe, who had just folded his newspaper, glanced over with a curious look. Emily walked up to the counter, placing the photo down on the wooden surface, her fingers lightly tapping on it. "Silverhawks, another biker gang, are keeping an eye on the Iron Vipers," she said, her voice low but firm. "They're not enemies, at least not yet. The leader, Stone, mentioned they've spotted military-grade weapons in the docks. If that's true, this isn't just about bullying anymore, Grace. We're up against something that could destroy Harbor's Edge." Grace bent down to look at the photo, her brown eyes widening as she recognized the crates in the warehouse. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "I knew the Iron Vipers were up to no good, but weapons like this? I've seen things like this back when my husband was alive. He worked at the docks and talked about shipments that were never inspected. I thought that was just a thing of the past." Emily nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at Grace. "Not the past anymore," she said. "And I need you to help me with something. You mentioned you hear things from people like Jimmy, the paperboy, or anyone else. I need every bit of information you have about the Iron Vipers and Grayson. If we want to stop this, I need to know exactly what we're up against." Grace took a deep breath, then nodded, her hands gripping her apron tightly. "I'll ask around discreetly. Jimmy isn't the only one who's noticed strange things at the docks. Mrs. Helen at the grocery store said last week some shady guys bought a bunch of King goods, paid in cash, and didn't say a word. I'll jot down everything I hear." "Thank you, Grace," Emily said, placing a hand on her shoulder, her voice carrying a rare warmth. "You are my eyes and ears here. I'll be back tonight." She turned to leave, but a small figure appeared in front of her, making her stop. Anna Lopez, the deputy chief of police at Harbor's Edge, pushed the door open and stepped inside, her light brown uniform slightly wrinkled after a long day. She was in her 30s, with her black hair pulled back and sharp brown eyes that were weary yet alert. "Emily Carter, right?" Anna asked, her tone straightforward but not hostile. "I spoke with Eddie Malone and Tommy Hayes this morning. The folks around here can't stop talking about you, how a stranger took down 2 Iron Vipers like something out of an action movie." Emily tilted her head, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets as she watched Anna. "I'm not looking for trouble," she replied, her voice steady. "But I won't let them bully anyone either. Did you come here about that?" Anna shook her head, and stepped closer to the counter, her gaze drifting over the photo Emily left behind. Not exactly. I came because I heard some things from Sheriff Cooper and a few folks down at the docks. The Iron Vipers are moving goods overnight, and Grayson ordered us not to intervene. Cooper wanted to keep everything calm, but I can't stand it anymore. This town used to be my home, and I don't want to see it fall into the hands of those bastards. Emily looked at Anna, realizing that the spark in her eyes wasn't blind anger, but the determination of someone ready to fight. "What do you know about the Silverhawks?" she asked, her voice dropping. Anna furrowed her brow and nodded slowly. "Veterans, mainly Marines, that don't cause trouble here, but I've heard they've clashed with the Iron Vipers in other towns like Eureka and Astoria. If they show up, then they might just smell trouble brewing." Emily nodded, her mind starting to piece things together. "I just met with Stone, their leader. They have evidence of military weapons in the hands of the Iron Vipers. If you want to protect Harbor's Edge, then we might need them, and you." Anna stood tall, hands on her hips, close to her service pistol. "Are you talking about an alliance? With a biker gang and a stranger like you? I'm not sure I trust you enough to jump into this." Emily smiled faintly, a smile tinged with the bitterness of someone who had been doubted too many times. "You don't have to believe me right away," she said. "But if you're here, it means you don't trust Grayson and the Iron Vipers either. Come with me tonight to meet Stone and the Silverhawks. Hear what they have to say, then decide for yourself." Anna looked at Emily for a long moment, then nodded, though she still wore a cautious expression. "All right, but if this is a trap, I swear I'll shoot first and ask questions later." "Fair enough," Emily replied, turning to walk out the door. Grace watched her go, her hand gripping the photo tightly on the counter. "Be careful, both of you," she called after them, her voice choked with emotion. As Emily and Anna stepped outside, the fog had thickened, obscuring the distant harbor. The sound of a motorcycle engine echoed from somewhere in the darkness, not the Iron Vipers, but the Silverhawks, a reminder that new allies were waiting. Emily tightened her hand in her jacket pocket, feeling the cold dagger. This alliance with Grace, Anna, and Stone could be her only chance to confront the Iron Vipers and the one pulling their strings. But she knew that for it to work, she would have to place her trust in people she had only seen as strangers just hours before. The night fell over Harbor's Edge, bringing with it the damp chill from the Pacific and the steady sound of waves lapping against the shore half a mile away. Emily Carter and Anna Lopez walked along the gravel path, leading to the open lot near the harbor, where Stone and the Silverhawks had arranged to meet. A thick fog clung to the town, obscuring the moonlight and leaving only the faint glow of streetlights flickering like lost fireflies. Emily walked ahead, her hands tucked into the pockets of her denim jacket, her fingers brushing against the dagger not for immediate use, but as a reminder that vigilance was the only thing that kept her alive through 20 years in the Navy. Anna walked alongside, her work boots tapping lightly on the gravel, her right hand resting close to the handgun at her hip. "I'm still not sure if this is a good idea," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Silverhawks may not be Iron Vipers, but they're still a biker gang. How do you know they're not playing both sides?" Emily glanced over at Anna, her blue eyes shimmering in the darkness. "I don't know," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with bitterness. "But I've worked with people I didn't trust and survived. If Stone is telling the truth about the military weapons, then we need them. Just you and I alone aren't enough to take down the Iron Vipers, not to mention Grayson or the one pulling the strings." Anna was silent, but her slight nod showed she agreed, albeit reluctantly. When they reached the clearing about 500 feet from the dock, 5 Harley-Davidson motorcycles lined up, emerging from the fog, the silver eagle emblem on the leather jackets glinting in the dim light. Stone stood in the middle, towering like a wall, his arms crossed over his chest. 3 other guys stood behind him, one holding a cigar, another fiddling with a dagger, and the third scanning the surroundings with eyes sharp as a blade. "Right on time," Stone said, his voice gravelly as he took a few steps closer, narrowing the distance to 20 feet. He looked at Anna, frowning. "Deputy Sheriff Lopez, huh? I didn't think you were the type to play nice with the lawbreakers." Anna stood tall, her hands away from the gun but her gaze fixed on Stone. "I'm not here because I like you. she replied. I'm here because the Iron Vipers are wrecking my town, and if this girl, she nodded toward Emily, is right, then you can help us stop them. Emily stepped forward, pulled a photo from her jacket pocket, and held it up. You said the Silverhawks were soldiers, she said, her voice low but firm. So, you understand the importance of information. This is proof of military weapons in the hands of the Iron Vipers. I know they're working for Grayson, and it could be someone bigger than Marcus Kane. If we want to stop this, I need to know what you're bringing to the negotiation table. Stone held the photo, gazing at it for a moment before handing it to the shorter man with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes, who was holding a cigar. Ranger, Stone said, his voice commanding. Check it out. Ranger examined the photo, nodding slowly. AR-15 M67 grenades, genuine military issue, he said, his voice hoarse from cigar smoke. This isn't your typical black market stuff. If the Iron Vipers have this, then they're backed by someone with money and connections. Emily nodded, her gaze locked onto Stone. That's what I'm worried about, she said. Grayson ordered the police not to interfere at the port. Grace Thompson, the diner owner, heard about the unmarked truck and the secret cargo. Anna confirmed that the Iron Vipers are moving goods overnight. We have a common enemy, Stone. The question is, what are you and the Silverhawks willing to do? Stone looked at Emily, then at Anna, his gray eyes glinting with a hint of admiration. You speak like an officer, he said, a faint smile creeping onto his lips. I spent 10 years in the Marines, 2 tours in Afghanistan. This ranger here is Delta Force. We don't take kindly to guys like the Iron Vipers using military weapons to bully civilians. If you have a plan, we can bring 15 people, all of whom know how to shoot and set traps. Anna frowned, but Emily raised her hand to stop her from protesting. I don't need an army, she said. I need a team that knows how to follow orders and strike fast. The Iron Vipers are moving cargo that could be tomorrow or the day after. We need to create a diversion, gather evidence, and lock down Grayson before he calls for reinforcements. Stone nodded, stepping closer, his voice dropping. All right, but if we're going to do this, it has to be done your way, clean and precise. I don't want any blood spilled for nothing. Fair enough, Emily replied, extending her hand. Stone shook her hand, the grip strong like a silent promise. Anna sighed, but she nodded too, her hand resting loosely at her side. As the Silverhawks drove away, the engine's roar blending into the night, Emily turned to Anna. Are you okay? She asked, her voice soft. Anna shrugged, a faint smile appearing on her lips. I don't know what I just agreed to, but I trust you at least for now. So what's next? Emily looked out at the harbor, where darkness concealed the Iron Viper's warehouse. Now we plan, she said. Grace, Anna, Silverhawks were a team. The Iron Vipers won't know what's coming until it's too late. She turned back toward Thompson's diner, with Anna following closely behind. This unexpected alliance of former Navy commander, a deputy sheriff, a group of veteran bikers, and a diner owner had formed. Harbor's Edge was no longer just her battleground. It belonged to all of them. The night at Harbor's Edge descended like a heavy blanket, with fog from Pacific lazily drifting through the streets, blurring the glow of the streetlights along Main Street. Inside Thompson's diner, the usual quiet atmosphere had given way to a tense stillness. Grace Thompson locked the front door, pulling down the shades to shield against curious eyes from outside, while Emily Carter stood at the counter, spreading an old map of Harbor's Edge across the wooden surface. Anna Lopez stood beside her, arms crossed, her sharp brown eyes scrutinizing every detail on the map. Stone, the leader of the Silverhawks, sat in a chair near the window, his large hands resting on the table, a photo of the Iron Viper's warehouse laid out in front of him. Emily pointed toward the port area, about half a mile east of the bar. This is where we start, she said, her voice low but firm, like a commander on the deck of a battleship. The Iron Vipers are moving military weapons through warehouse number 3 AR-15s, grenades, maybe even more. If we let them complete this shipment, Harbor's Edge won't be our home anymore. It will become Marcus Kane's distribution center. Anna furrowed her brow, her fingers lightly tapping on the counter. Are you sure Kane is behind this? she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Grayson is already a big problem, and adding another international crime boss means we're facing something beyond our control. Emily nodded, her green eyes locked onto Anna. I'm not 100% sure, she admitted. But my contact hawk at DIA said the Iron Vipers are linked to smuggling for the small ports along the west coast. Marcus Kane was once my target in Singapore, a failed operation that cost me 2 teammates. If he's here, then this shipment isn't just weapons. It's the first step to turning Harbor's Edge into a launch pad for his network. Stone leaned forward, his gray eyes shining with determination. I don't care who Kane is, he said, his voice low and gravelly. If he and the Iron Vipers are bringing military weapons into my territory, they need to be stopped. The question is, what's your plan, Carter? Emily smiled faintly, her smile carrying the sharp edge of a warrior who had faced dead-end situations. We don't go in head-on, she said, pointing to the narrow streets around the harbor on the map. The Iron Vipers are more numerous, armed to the teeth, and Grayson has the official police in his pocket. If we charge in guns blazing, we'll lose or worse. The people here will pay the price. Anna nodded slowly, starting to grasp the idea. So you want to create a distraction? She asked. Use the Silverhawks as bait? Not just a decoy, Emily replied, her finger tracing a curve over the west side of the harbor. We'll split into 3 teams. Stone, you and the Silverhawks will create a distraction here on Old Harbor Road, about 1,000 feet from the docks. Drive through, make some noise, so the Iron Vipers think another gang is attacking. That will draw some of their forces out. Stone nodded, a smirk appearing on his scarred face. Easy enough. We know how to make guys like Eddie Malone panic. But what about you and Lopez? Emily shifted her hand to the center of the dock. Anna, you and I will sneak into warehouse number 3 from the south along the boardwalk, which is about 300 feet long and not heavily guarded. I saw 2 guys standing watch there this morning, but they were lazy and not paying attention to what was behind them. We'll take pictures and collect samples of anything that proves Grayson and the Iron Vipers are involved. Anna furrowed her brow, her hand resting on her hip near the handgun. Sounds great, but what if we get caught? I don't want to die in that stinky fish warehouse. We won't get caught, Emily said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had led far more dangerous missions than this one 100 times over. The Silverhawks will keep them busy, and I know how to move without making a sound. 20 years in the Navy isn't just for show. Grace, who had been standing silently, stepped forward with a small, worn leather notebook. I can help, she said, her voice soft yet resolute. I asked around this afternoon, like you requested. Jimmy mentioned that a few trucks arrive at the port around 11 p.m., usually with 4 guards, 2 at the front gate and 2 in the parking lot. Mrs. Helen saw Grayson meeting Eddie at the club last week, talking about making sure the shipment goes out on time. Emily looked at Grace, her eyes shining with admiration. You're amazing, Grace, she said. That information is gold. If we can catch Grayson on paper or in a photo, we can take this up a notch and go beyond the local police. Stone stood up, his large hands gripping the edge of the table. So we have a plan, he said. The Silverhawks will create a distraction at 11 p.m. tomorrow. You and Lopez will break in. Thompson will provide the intel. But what if Eddie calls and more people from Kane? Emily straightened up, her green eyes shining with determination. Then we need to be faster, she replied. Strike before they can react. I'll call Hawk and ask him to monitor from the satellite, just in case reinforcements come in from outside the town. We're not just going to take out this shipment. We're going to expose the Iron Vipers and Grayson. Anna sighed, but a faint smile appeared on her lips. You really are crazy, Carter, but I like this kind of crazy. Grace placed the notebook down on the counter, her hands trembling slightly, but her gaze steady. Just do it, she said. Harbor's Edge is worth fighting for. Emily nodded, rolling up the map, her grip tightening around it like a promise. Tomorrow, she said, her voice resonating in the quiet of the cafe. We'll start this fight not with guns, but with our minds. She stepped out the door, Anna and Stone following behind, leaving Grace standing there, a mix of hope and worry in her eyes. The darkness outside awaited, but this time They would be the ones setting the trap. The second night at Harbor's Edge settled in with a heavy atmosphere, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The clock in Thompson's diner read 10:45 p.m. when Emily Carter double-checked her gear. A dagger hidden in her denim jacket pocket, a compact camera, and a Glock 19 she had taken from the wooden box under her bed. She stood at the counter, her sharp blue eyes scanning the Harbor's Edgeport map one last time, memorizing every little street and the 300-foot boardwalk that she and Anna Lopez would use to break into warehouse number 3. Anna stood by, wearing a black coat instead of her police uniform, her service pistol tucked into her belt. "Are you sure the Silverhawks will be on time?" she asked, her voice low but tinged with worry. "If Stone is late, we'll be stuck in that warehouse with a bunch of iron vipers." Emily nodded, rolling up the map. "Stone used to be a Marine," she replied, her voice steady like a commander before a battle. "He knows the value of time. At 11 p.m., he'll lead the Silverhawks down Old Harbor 1,000 feet from the docks. The sound of their engines will draw the iron vipers out far enough for us to have a 15-minute window." Grace Thompson stepped out of the kitchen, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Here you go, you two," she said, placing them on the counter with a faint smile. "I won't be sleeping tonight, so just drink up my coffee will keep you both awake." She paused, her brown eyes filled with concern. "Be careful, Emily. Anna, I don't know what will happen if they catch you too." Emily held the coffee cup, the warmth spreading through her palms. "We'll be okay, Grace," she said, her voice carrying a rare warmth. "You've given us the information. Now it's our turn to act." She took a sip, the familiar bitterness helping her focus, then set the cup down. "Let's go, Anna." The two of them left the cafe and stepped out onto Main Street, shrouded in thick fog. The sea breeze blew fiercely, carrying the scent of salt and the sound of waves crashing half a mile away. They walked south along the narrow walkway that ran parallel to the shore, Anna's shoes tapping lightly on the stones, while Emily moved silently, a skill she honed over 20 years in the Navy. As they approached warehouse number 3, about 200 feet away, Emily signaled for Anna to stop, ducking behind a rusty shipping container. Through the fog, they spotted 2 iron vipers standing guard at the back door of the warehouse. One was smoking, the glowing tip of his cigarette flickering like a firefly, while the other held a walkie-talkie, his low voice crackling intermittently. "Haven't seen anything," Malone said to keep a close watch. Emily glanced at her wristwatch. 10:58 p.m. "Get ready," she whispered to Anna. "The Silverhawks are about to arrive." At exactly 11 o'clock, the sound of a motorcycle engine roared from the west, fading away toward Old Harbor. The growl of the Harley-Davidson sliced through the night, powerful and chaotic, like a pack of wild beasts charging forward. 2 guards jumped. The one smoking dropped his cigarette to ground, while the other, holding a walkie-talkie, shouted into the device. "There's a vehicle from the west. Some guys are coming." The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from inside the warehouse, and 3 other iron vipers rushed out, handguns gripped tightly in their hands, racing toward the noise. Emily gave a faint smile and signaled to Anna. "Now!" she whispered. They crouched low and quickly moved through the 50-foot gap to the back door of the warehouse, using the fog as their cover. Emily pushed the unlocked door, just as she had guessed from the guard's laziness, and the two slipped inside. Once inside, the smell of machine oil and damp would hit their noses, and the light from a few hanging bulbs illuminated the stacks of crates piled up to 10 feet high. Anna pulled out her camera, starting to snap pictures of the wooden crates that revealed an AR-15, M67 grenades, and several neatly stacked boxes of ammunition. "Oh my God!" she whispered, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed the shutter. "This isn't stuff for bikers. This is military gear." Emily nodded, took a grenade from the crate, and checked the serial number on the casing. "Standard issue could be stolen from the federal stockpile," she said, her voice dropping. "If Kane is behind this, then he has deeper connections than I thought." She stuffed the grenade into her bag and signaled for Anna to keep shooting. The walkie-talkie crackled from the corner of the warehouse, about 30 feet away from them. Silverhawks. They just ran past, head back to the warehouse now. Eddie Rattler Malone's voice roared to the radio. filled with fury. Emily and Anna exchanged a glance, realizing time was running out. "Hurry up," Emily whispered, pulling Anna toward a larger shipping crate and lifting the lid. Inside were shipping invoices, a list of locations, and one name stood out: Grayson delivery by Wednesday. Anna snapped photos continuously, the flash lighting up the darkness. "We've got him," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and tension. Grayson can't deny it anymore. But before they could leave, hurried footsteps echoed from the front of the warehouse. Emily pulled Anna down behind a stack of crates, gripping her Glock 19 tightly. 3 Iron Vipers stepped inside, handguns drawn, their eyes scanning the area. "Check it thoroughly," one of them shouted. Malone said something's off. The Silverhawks aren't going to attack head-on. Emily tightened her grip on the gun, her breathing steady even though her heart raced. "Don't move," she whispered to Anna, her icy blue eyes sharp as steel. The Silverhawks had done their part. Now it was time for her and Anna to get out, evidence in hand. But as the flashlight of the Iron Vipers swept closer, within less than 10 feet, she knew their 15-minute window had just shrunk dramatically. Inside warehouse number 3 at Harbor's Edge, the air was thick with the smell of machine oil and damp wood, the light from the hanging bulbs flickering weakly on the ceiling. Emily Carter and Anna Lopez huddled behind a 10-foot-high shipping crate, their breath steady yet tense as the flashlights of 3 Iron Vipers swept through, less than 10 feet away. The sound of footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, mingling with the growling voice of one thug. "Check thoroughly," Malone said. The Silverhawks aren't stupid enough to attack head-on. Something's off. Emily tightened her grip on the Glock 19 in her hand, her cold blue eyes like steel watching every movement through the gap between the crates. Anna, clutching the camera tightly, whispered, "We need to get out of here right now." Emily signaled for silence, shaking her head slightly. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice low but firm. "They're panicking, but not enough chaos. If we run now, they'll spot us before we reach the door." She glanced at the clock. 11:08 p.m. The Silverhawks had done their part, drawing some of the Iron Viper's forces away. But Eddie Rattler Malone was clearly suspicious. She needed one more move to get out of here with the evidence, the photos, and grenades in her bag, along with the documents linking Grayson to the shipment. The walkie-talkie crackled to life from the guy holding the flashlight, about 15 feet away from them. "Malone, the Silverhawks have bolted. There's no sign of them on Old Harbor Road anymore. What do you want us to do?" Eddie's voice roared through the radio, filled with fury. "Get back to the warehouse right now. If anyone's in there, I want them dead before they even get a chance to scream." The guy with the flashlight nodded to his 2 companions, signaling them to split up and search. One of them moved toward Emily and Anna's shipping crate, the light sweeping closer, now only 5 feet away. Emily took a deep breath, 20 years of Navy experience swirling in her mind like a vivid map. "Anna," she whispered, her voice sharp yet calm, "when I signal, you run to the back door 50 feet straight south. Don't look back." Anna nodded, gripping the camera tightly, her brown eyes shining with a mix of trust and fear. As soon as the flashlight beam swept across the edge of the crate, Emily sprang into action. She picked up a small piece of wood from the floor and threw it hard toward a corner of the warehouse 20 feet away. The clank echoed as it hit a metal drum, causing the 3 Iron Vipers to jump and turn around. "Over there," the guy with the flashlight shouted, and all 3 rushed toward the sound, their handguns gripped tightly. Emily shoved Anna and whispered, "Run." Anna rushed, her shoes tapping lightly on the floor as she sprinted toward the back door, the fog outside swallowing her silhouette for a moment. Emily stood up, crouching low, moving back toward the corner of the storage room where she had thrown the piece of wood. She tucked herself behind another crate, pulling a grenade from her bag, not to use, but to bait. As the 3 guys approached, she rolled the grenade across the floor, the metallic clink echoing in the quiet space. "Grenade!" one guy shouted, and all 3 of them dove to the floor, hands over their heads. Emily didn't wait. She sprinted back toward the rear door, her boots making no sound thanks to the stealth skills she learned from NAVSB CWRCOM. As she burst outside, the cold fog enveloped her, and Anna was waiting about 10 feet away, gasping for breath. "You're crazy," Anna whispered, but a faint smile crept onto her lips. "Not crazy enough to die," Emily replied, pulling Anna as they ran down the sidewalk to the south, 200 feet away from the warehouse before an angry scream erupted from inside. "No explosion, they're messing with us," the guy with the flashlight yelled, but the sound of a motorcycle engine from Old Harbor roared back as the Silver Hawks returned, just as Emily had predicted Stone would do to prolong the chaos. They ran to Thompson's diner, crossing Main Street in the dark, heading for the back door that Grace had left ajar. When they stepped inside, Grace was waiting with a worried look, clutching a coffee pot like a weapon for protection. "Oh my God, are you two okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Anna raised her camera, panting. "We have proof that Grayson is involved with the shipment, but the Iron Vipers know someone's in the warehouse." Emily placed a grenade on the counter, her bright blue eyes shining with determination. "They don't know who we are," she said, her voice low. "The Silver Hawks did a great job keeping Eddie and his goons occupied long enough for us to get away. But Malone is going to call for backup, possibly from Kane." She turned to Anna. "Did you send that photo to anyone in the police department you trust?" Anna nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket. "Sheriff Cooper, he doesn't like Grayson, but he's scared. I'll send it through a secure channel, telling him to keep it under wraps until we have more." She started uploading the photos, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. Grace set the coffee pot down, her hands trembling slightly, but her gaze steady. "What about me?" she asked. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." Emily smiled faintly, placing her hand on Grace's shoulder. "You've done enough with your information to save us tonight. But if you want, ask around tomorrow morning to see if anyone saw a truck or any strangers near the docks. Every detail matters." The sound of a motorcycle engine roared outside, closer this time. Emily stepped out the back door, peering through the crack. Stone and 3 Silver Hawks parked their bikes about 100 feet from the bar, headlights cutting through the fog. Stone walked up, his deep voice booming. "The Iron Vipers aren't a mess like chickens with their heads cut off. Malone is yelling over the radio for backup. What can you do in there?" Emily held up the grenade and showed it to Stone. "Evidence," she said. "Military-grade weaponry. Paperwork linking Grayson. We have enough to make him sweat, but not enough to take down Kane if he's really behind this." Stone nodded, his gray eyes shining with admiration. "Good, but the Iron Vipers will come back stronger. What's your next plan?" Emily gazed out the fog, where Harbor's edge loomed like a ghost. "Let's take a break," she said. "Tomorrow, we'll go back in, not just to gather evidence, but to seal the deal." She turned back to the bar, where Anne and Grace stood waiting, their eyes shining with a mix of hope and determination. The smart operation tonight was a success. They have the evidence, they got away, and the Iron Vipers are in a panic. But Emily knows this is just the beginning. Eddie will call in reinforcements. Grayson will react. And Marcus Kane, if he's really here, won't let everything fall apart so easily. She clenched her fists, feeling the chill of the night seep through her jacket. Early in the morning, after the break-in at warehouse number 3, Harbor's edge woke up to an unusual atmosphere. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting soft golden rays through the thin veil of fog lingering from the Pacific. But the damp chill of the night still clung to the cobblestone streets along Main Street. Inside Thompson's diner, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the clatter of dishes as Grace Thompson prepared to open up. Emily Carter sat at a table near the window, her tired but sharp blue eyes scanning the street outside, a steaming cup of coffee in hand that Grace had just poured. Anna Lopez stood near the counter, phone in hand, still checking messages from Sheriff Cooper about the photos they had taken the night before. Grace stepped up and placed a steaming plate of apple pie in front of Emily. "You look like you need this more than coffee," she said, her voice gentle yet filled with concern. "You two scared me to death last night. I thought the Iron Vipers were going to bust down the door any minute." Emily offered a faint smile, a rare warmth amidst the tension of recent days. "We're good, Grace," she said, lifting her slice of cake. "You've helped us gather the photo evidence, the documents, and even that grenade. Now the Iron Vipers are in disarray and we have the upper hand." She took a sip of coffee, the bitterness sharpening her senses. But her mind was still spinning with what Stone had reported Eddie Malone had called in reinforcements, and Grayson might be planning a counterattack. Anna set her phone down on the counter, arms crossed. "Cooper just texted," she said, her voice low. "He confirmed that the documents we took have Grayson's signature, sent to a shell company in San Francisco. But he's worried Grayson will find out who sent the photos. He wants to wait for more evidence before reporting it to the higher-ups." Emily nodded, setting her coffee cup down. "We don't have time to wait," she said. "If Malone brings in more people from Marcus Kane, Harbor's Edge will turn into a battlefield before Cooper can even act. We need the people to rise up, not just protect them, but so they can protect themselves." Grace frowned, her hand stopping as she wiped the counter. "What do you mean, Emily? The people here are terrified of the Iron Vipers. They're not soldiers like you or Stone." Emily stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at Main Street, which was starting to see a few people passing by, a fisherman pulling a cart, Mrs. Helen from the grocery store rolling up her door, and young Jimmy riding his bike to deliver newspapers. "They don't need to be soldiers," she said, her voice low but filled with emotion. "I've seen worse places than these villages in the Philippines, towns in Iraq. When people stand together, they're stronger than any gang. Harbor's Edge isn't weak. It just doesn't know its own strength yet." Anna stepped forward, her brown eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What do you want them to do? Report the Iron Vipers? Or grab a broom and chase them off?" Emily turned back, her eyes lighting up with an idea. "Both," she replied. "Grace, you said you could ask around about what happened last night. Now I need you to call those you trust Jimmy, Helen, anyone who might have seen the truck or the Iron Vipers doing anything unusual. Anna, you convince Cooper that he doesn't need to show his face just yet, but at least have him ready to back us up when we have enough pressure." Grace nodded slowly, her hand gripping the worn leather cover of her small notebook tightly. "I know a few people," she said. "Jimmy's scared, but he's honest. Helen has hated the Iron Vipers ever since they forced her to pay for protection. And old man Sam, the fisherman over there, has seen trucks parked near the fish market late at night. I'll call them here this afternoon." Anna shrugged, but a faint smile appeared on her lips. "I'll talk to Cooper. He doesn't like me much because I tend to argue, but I know how to make him listen." Emily smiled, a warm feeling spreading in her heart despite the dangerous situation. "Good," she said. "I'll meet with Stone to make sure the Silverhawks are ready for the next round. We're not just gathering evidence. Anymore, we're building a wall that the Iron Vipers can't get over." That afternoon, Thompson's Diner became the center of an unexpected meeting. Grace stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for 4 residents of Harbor's Edge gathered around a large table. Jimmy, the 15-year-old paperboy with wide, worried eyes; Helen, the 60-year-old grocery store owner with silver hair and a determined gaze; Sam, the old fisherman with calloused hands from handling nets; and Anna, now sitting with them as part of the group. Emily stood in front of the table, arms crossed, her voice ringing out clearly in the quiet space. "I know everyone is scared," she began, her gaze sweeping over each person. "I've been scared in far-off places, where no one thinks they can win. But I've learned that strength doesn't come from guns. It comes from the people standing together. The Iron Vipers think Harbor's Edge is weak because it's small, because people are quiet. But last night, we proved them wrong. And today, I need you all to help us keep going." Jimmy swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I saw a truck last week near warehouse number 3. Around midnight, there were 4 guys. 2 of them had guns. I ran straight home. Didn't dare tell anyone." Helen placed her hand on Jimmy's shoulder, her voice firm. "I've seen them come into my shop, demanding protection money. I pretended to pay, but I noted the date and time in my ledger. I won't let them rob me blind." Sam nodded, his voice hoarse from the sea breeze. "I saw a truck parked near the fishery that didn't belong to any fisherman. No nets in sight. I think it was carrying something heavy because the tires were sunk deep into the gravel." Emily nodded, her eyes lighting up with hope. "Each of your stories is a brick," she said. "When we put them together, it will form a wall that the Iron Vipers can't break through. Grace will record it, and Anna will give it to the sheriff. And I promise we won't leave you alone. Grace held up the notebook, a faint smile appearing on her lips. I've been writing in this for 5 years, and now with all of you, it's going to be so much heavier. A soft laugh broke the tension in the air. The small flame of the Harbor's Edge community had been ignited, and Emily knew it would soon blaze bright. The evening at Harbor's Edge passed in an unsettling silence, as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to hit. Inside Thompson's diner, the dim yellow lights cast a glow on the determined faces. Emily Carter stood by the window, her blue eyes watching Main Street through the slightly parted curtains. Grace Thompson sat behind the counter, her leather-bound notebook open in front of her, jotting down notes from the afternoon meeting. Anna Lopez stood beside her, phone in hand, sending a message to Sheriff Cooper with photos and notes from the community. The atmosphere in the diner was more than just tension. It carried a glimmer of hope, like a small flame ignited by the stories of Jimmy, Helen, and Sam. Emily turned back, arms crossed over her chest, her voice ringing clearly in the quiet space. "We have a good start," she said, her gaze sweeping over Grace and Anna. "Jimmy, Helen, Sam, they're not just telling stories. They're ready to stand up. That's the strength that the Iron Vipers never saw coming. But we need more. We need the whole town to know they're not alone." Grace looked up from her notebook, her finger pausing on the pen. "You mean to make this public?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with worry. "I agree that the people need to know, but if the Iron Vipers catch wind of this, they won't just retaliate against you or Anna, but also Jimmy, Helen, everyone." Emily nodded, her gaze heavy but unwavering. "I know the risks," she said, "but I also know that silence is what has allowed them to win all this time. In Singapore, we lost because no one dared to speak up. The people were afraid, and my teammates died. I won't let that happen again at Harbor's Edge. We don't need to shout for the whole world to hear. We just need to whisper, enough to let the fire spread." Anna set her phone down on the counter, arms crossed. "I agree with you," she said, her voice low but firm. "Cooper just texted back that he doesn't dare report it to the higher-ups right away, but he'll keep the evidence. If the public puts pressure on him, he might be forced to act. But how do we get them involved without making them targets?" Emily walked over to the big table where Grace had left a plate of leftover apple pie from earlier. She picked up a piece, took a bite to regain her energy, and said, "Let's start small, Grace. Call a few more people tonight, those you absolutely trust. Anna, you're coming with me to meet Stone. Make sure the Silverhawks are ready to protect us if the Iron Vipers react. The people don't need to carry guns. They just need to speak up and stand together." Grace nodded, her hand gripping the notebook tightly. "I know a few more people," she said. "Mary from the tailor shop saw the Iron Vipers threatening her husband last week. And Mr. Pete, the mechanic, he once refused to fix Eddie Malone's car, and they smashed his windows. I'll call them to come here at 8 o'clock. Anna shrugged, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "You really know how to turn a diner into a resistance headquarters, Carter. I'll go with you to meet Stone, but if the Silverhawks cause too much trouble, I'm not taking the blame." Emily smiled softly, the first hint of comfort she had felt all day. "Fair enough," she said, pulling her denim jacket tighter around her. "Let's go." They left the diner at 7:30 p.m., stepping out onto Main Street, now shrouded in darkness, with only a few flickering lights from the small shops cutting through the fog. The ocean breeze blew strong, carrying the salty scent from half a mile away as they headed toward the vacant lot near the harbor, about 1,000 feet from Thompson's diner. Stone and 3 of the Silverhawks were already waiting, 5 Harley-Davidsons lined up, their headlights piercing the night. Stone approached, his large hands crossed over his chest, his deep voice resonating. "Last night went smoothly, but the Iron Vipers are still all tangled up. However, Malone called in reinforcements. I spotted some unfamiliar trucks parked along the coastal road a couple hours ago." Emily nodded, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, fingers brushing against the dagger. "We have the paperwork linking Grace and photos of the shipment," she said, "but we need the people to stand up. Tonight, Grace will call in more folks. They'll provide intel and put pressure on the sheriff. I need the Silverhawks ready not to engage directly, but to protect in case the Iron Vipers retaliate. Stone tilted his head, his gray eyes shining with admiration. "You're playing it smart, Carter," he said. "We'll patrol the streets. 15 of us split into 3 groups, covering Main Street and the docks. If the Iron Vipers make a move, we'll intercept them before they get close to the people." Anna stepped forward, her hand close to her handgun. "I don't really like you guys," she said bluntly. "But if she trusts you, then I'll trust you for now. Don't do anything stupid, Stone." Stone scoffed, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been through Afghanistan. Lopez. I'm not stupid." He turned back to the group, signaling for them to get in the vehicle, the engine roaring to life before fading into the fog. When Emily and Anna returned to Thompson's diner at 8 o'clock, the place was busier. Grace stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for Mary, a woman in her 40s with red hair and a worried expression, and Pete, an old man with a thin frame and hands covered in grease. Jimmy, Helen, and Sam were also there, gathered around the large table, their eyes shining with a mix of determination and fear. Emily stood before them, her voice ringing out strong like commander. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But last night, we got evidence from the Iron Vipers stashed for Grace, for Jimmy, for all of you. They think they're stronger than us, but they're wrong. Every story you tell, every detail you provide, is a hammer blow against them." Mary took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "They threatened my husband, saying if we don't pay up, they'll burn down the tailor shop. I saw them parked near the docks last week, 2 guys. One of them had a gun." Pete nodded, his voice raspy. "Eddie Malone smashed the garage window because I wouldn't fix his car. I saw the truck driving by at night, without any lights, no license plate." Grace quickly jotted down notes in her notebook, her eyes lighting up. "We're making progress," she said. "Harbor's Edge isn't quiet anymore." Emily nodded, her eyes blazing with intensity. The small flame from this afternoon had spread not through gunfire, but through the ordinary people standing up for their town. If you believe that the strength of ordinary people can change an entire town, hit like and subscribe to the Legendary Narratives channel right now, because the story of Harbor's Edge isn't just theirs, it's all of ours, and we need you to keep this flame burning. Thank you. The night at Thompson's diner had passed half an hour after the second meeting, but the atmosphere inside was warm and lively, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside on Main Street. Grace Thompson stood behind the counter, her leather-bound notebook now filled with scrawled notes from Jimmy, Helen, Sam, Mary, and Pete, each story a piece of the puzzle that Emily Carter was putting together to protect Harbor's Edge. Emily stood in the middle of the group, her bright blue eyes blazing with conviction, arms crossed as she looked at each ordinary citizen who had chosen not to remain silent any longer. "Thank you, everyone," Emily said, her voice ringing strong yet warm, like a fire that warms a room. "What you're doing tonight, standing up, sharing what you've seen, is more than just words. It's a power that the Iron Vipers can't comprehend. They think they can use guns and fear to control us. But they forget that a town isn't just buildings or streets. It's the people. It's all of you." Anna Lopez stood nearby, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, a faint smile on her lips. "I just sent everything to Cooper," she said, her voice low but tinged with pride. "Pictures, notes, everything. He can't pretend he doesn't see it anymore. If we keep up this pressure, Grayson will have to respond." Grace closed a notebook, placing it on the counter with a soft clink, her eyes shining. "I've lived here for 40 years, she said, her voice choked with emotion. "My husband used to say that Harbor's Edge is a place where people take care of each other. I forgot that when the Iron Vipers came, but tonight, I remember." Jimmy looked up, his big round eyes now less fearful. "Do you think we can win, Miss Emily?" he asked, his voice soft but full of hope. Emily stepped forward and placed her hand on Jimmy's shoulder. "We've already won one battle," she replied. "Last night, we gathered the evidence. Tonight, you all give us the strength. The Iron Vipers have no idea what's coming, and by the time they realize it, it'll be too late." The sound of a motorcycle engine echoed from afar, about 500 feet from the Silverhawks, patrolling as Stone promised. Emily turned to the window, peering through the curtain. "They're protecting us," she said. "But the real power is here in this room, in each and every one of you. Helen stood up, her hands clenched tight. "I will tell the others," she said, her voice strong. "We're not going to let them win." Emily nodded, her gaze sweeping over everyone. "That's right," she said. "The fire has ignited, and it won't be extinguished." She stepped out the back door, with Anna following closely behind, leaving Grace and the crowd with a renewed sense of hope. Outside, thick fog enveloped them. But within Emily, an unquenchable fire had spread throughout Harbor's Edge the strength of the community, ready to confront the Iron Vipers and anyone else lurking in the shadows. 3 days after the community night at Thompson's Diner, the small coastal town of Harbor's Edge was wrapped in a suffocating tension. The fog from the Pacific was thicker than ever, shrouding Main Street like a curtain hiding the quiet chaos unfolding beneath it. Emily Carter stood in her tiny 400-square-foot apartment above the diner, clutching an encrypted satellite phone, her sharp blue eyes scanning the harbor half a mile away. A message from Daniel Hawk. Reynolds had just come through, brief but icy. Kane confirmed in Harbor's Edge. His team is arriving tonight with heavy weapons. 20 gunmen. Be careful, Carter. Emily set her phone down on the old wooden table. Her hand clenched into a fist. Marcus Kane, a name like an unhealed scar in her heart, was now present. No longer a ghost from her past, but a living threat right before her eyes. 8 years ago, in Singapore, she led a nav spectrum team in pursuit of Kane, an international smuggler with a network stretching from Asia to South America. The operation failed because of a traitor and 2 of her teammates, Jackson and Lopez, were killed in an ambush set by Kane. She escaped, but carried the pain and a vow to find him. Now, at Harbor's Edge, that vow was about to become a reality. She wore a denim jacket, hiding a dagger and a Glock 19 in her pocket, then stepped down the creaky wooden stairs. Thompson's Diner was lit up, and Grace Thompson stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for Anna Lopez and Stone, who had just arrived with news from the Silver Hawks. The community had done their part, Jimmy, Helen, Sam, Mary, Pete, and others providing information about the trucks and the Iron Vipers' activities, putting pressure on Sheriff Cooper. But when Emily walked in, her gaze carried a weight that both Grace and Anna recognized. "Kane is coming tonight," Emily said, her voice resonating in the quiet of the bar. She placed her hand on the counter, her gaze sweeping over each person. Hawk confirmed 20 gunmen, heavy weapons. The Iron Vipers aren't just a problem anymore. This is Kane, and he wants to take control of this port at all costs. Grace stopped pouring the coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "Oh, God," she whispered, her brown eyes filled with worry. "We just started to stand up, and now what, Emily?" Anna stood tall, her hand resting near the handgun at her waist. "We have proof that Grayson won't get away," she said, her voice firm. "But if Kane brings a whole team, Cooper and I won't stand a chance. What about the Silver Hawks, Stone?" Stone leaned forward, his large hands gripping the edge of the table. "We have 15 guys who used to be soldiers, who know how to fight," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "But 20 armed men with heavy weapons is a whole different story. If Kane comes straight to the port, we need a plan that goes beyond just creating a distraction like last time." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of determination and personal pain. "He didn't come just for the port," she said. "He came for me. I almost caught him in Singapore, and he knows I'm here. This isn't just Harbor's Edge's battle. Anymore it's mine." She paused, taking a deep breath, memories of Jackson, and Lopez crashing over her like a fierce wave. Grace stepped forward, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said, her voice choked but resolute. "We're here for you, me, Anna, Stone, the whole town. If Kane wants you, he'll have to go through us." Emily turned back, her gaze softening as she looked at Grace. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "But I won't let any of you die because of this. We'll play it smart like we always have. Stone, Silver Hawks will patrol the docks tonight, about 1,000 feet from Warehouse 3, making noise to draw Kane's forces out. Anna, you and Cooper be ready at the police station when we have Kane. Grayson will fall." Anna nodded, holding her phone. "I'll call Cooper. He has to show up this time." Stone stood up, his gray eyes shining with admiration. "All right then, but what are you planning to do, Carter? Don't tell me you're going to face Kane all by yourself." Emily smiled faintly, a smile tinged with the bitterness of someone who has lost too much. "I'll be at warehouse number 3, she said. "If Kane wants me, he'll have to come there. I know how to set a trap, and this time I won't let him get away." As Stone and Anna left to get ready, Grace pulled Emily aside, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure about this, Emily? I see in your eyes that it's not just about fighting. It's about revenge." Emily looked at Grace, memories of Singapore flooding back the gunfire, Jackson's screams, Lopez's final gaze before he fell. "That's right," she admitted, her voice low. "But it's not just revenge, it's justice. For them and for Harbor's Edge." She stepped out the back door, the cold sea breeze hitting her face. Tonight, at Warehouse 3, she would confront Marcus Kane not just to protect the town, but close a painful chapter in her life. She walked down Main Street, 2,000 feet from the harbor, her boots tapping lightly on the stones. As she reached Warehouse 3, thick fog obscured her view, but she could hear the distant rumble of a truck engine. Kane had arrived. Emily pressed herself behind a rusty shipping container, her grip tightening around the Glock 19. Footsteps echoed, and then a cold, deep voice sliced through the night. "Carter, I know you're here. Singapore is just the beginning. Harbor's Edge will be the end." Emily took a deep breath, the ghost from her past now standing right in front of her. Her personal battle had begun. Thick fog enveloped Warehouse 3 at Harbor's Edge, turning everything into shadowy figures beneath the dim lights hanging from the ceiling. Emily Carter crouched behind a rusty shipping container, about 30 feet from the main entrance, her grip tightening around the Glock 19 as Marcus Kane's cold voice sliced through the night like a knife. "Carter, I know you're here. Singapore was the beginning. Harbor's Edge will be the end." His words were not just a threat. They were a declaration of war, pulling her back to memories from 8 years ago, when smoke and blood stained the docks of Singapore, where Jackson and Lopez fell victim to betrayal Kane had orchestrated. Emily took a deep breath, 20 years of Navy experience coiling within each inhale. She didn't respond. Silence was her first weapon. Heavy footsteps echoed. At least 5 guys, accompanied by the metallic clinks of Kane's squad's rifles taking their positions. From a distance, about 1,000 feet from the harbor, the roar of the Harley-Davidson engines from the Silver Hawks thundered, just as Stone had planned to create a distraction. But Emily knew Kane wasn't easily fooled. He was here for her, and he wouldn't leave without bloodshed. She crouched low, moving silently along the south wall of the warehouse, 20 feet from the entrance. Through the gap between the crates, she saw Kane, tall and silver-haired with short cut, wearing a black leather jacket, his cold gray eyes scanning the area like a predator. He held a Beretta handgun, and his voice echoed again, this time closer. "Do you think you can hide forever, Carter? I've heard about your little game with the townsfolk. Silver Hawks, the evidence. But you forget that I'm always one step ahead." Emily tilted her head, her green eyes flashing as she spotted Kane's 3 gunmen approaching the east side of the warehouse, just 40 feet away. She pulled a dagger from her jacket pocket, keeping her Glock in her other hand. As the first guy rounded the corner of the shipping crate, she sprang forward like lightning, driving the knife into his wrist, causing his gun to clatter to the floor with a clink. He screamed, but Emily kicked hard at his knee, sending him crashing to the ground, unconscious before he could call for backup. The noise caught the attention of the other 2 guys, their rifles aimed at her. Emily rolled behind a crate, bullets hitting the wood just inches away from her, splinters flying everywhere. She fired back with her Glock, 2 shots hitting the second guy squarely in the shoulder and chest, sending him crashing to the floor. The third guy shouted into his walkie-talkie, "She's here." But before he could pull the trigger, Emily charged forward, bringing the butt of her gun down hard against his temple, taking out the threat. Kane laughed loudly, his raspy voice echoing in the warehouse. "Not bad, Carter," he said, stepping out of the shadows, 15 feet away from her. "But you can't take down my whole team, and you definitely can't take me down." He raised his gun and fired a shot toward the cargo crate, the bullet grazing Emily's shoulder, leaving a tear in her jacket and a warm stream of blood running down her arm. Emily gritted her teeth, the sharp pain shooting through her, but it didn't make her falter. She rolled out from her hiding spot, firing 3 quick shots from her Glock, forcing Kane to duck behind a large shipping crate. "Singapore's your fault," she shouted, her voice filled with the pain and anger that had built up over 8 years. "Jackson and Lopez died because of you, and I won't let Harbor's Edge be the next victim." Kane sneered, firing 2 shots that struck the floor just a few feet away from her. "They died because you're weak, Carter," he said, his voice icy. "You think you can protect this little town? Iron Vipers are just pawns. I'm the king, and you're going to lose just like in Singapore." Emily charged forward, refusing to let his words shake her. She hurled the dagger at Kane, the blade embedding itself in his left shoulder, causing him to scream and drop his gun. He lunged at her, delivering a hard punch to her stomach with his right hand. But Emily held her ground, using her elbow to strike his chin. The two of them grappled, blood streaming from Kane's shoulder and Emily's arm, their heavy breaths mingling with the sound of metal clattering against the floor. She delivered a powerful kick to Kane's knee, hearing the sickening crack of bone breaking. He fell to the ground, but still roared, "You have no idea what you just did." Emily stood over him, Glock aimed at his head, her finger trembling slightly on the trigger. "I know exactly," she said, her voice low and cold. "This is for Jackson, for Lopez, for Harbor's Edge." She didn't shoot him in the head. Instead, she fired at Kane's other leg, knocking him out cold from the excruciating pain. The sound of Silverhawk's engines grew closer, and Stone and his team rushed into the warehouse, guns in hand. "Are you okay?" Stone shouted, his gray eyes scanning the scene of 3 men lying motionless, Kane groaning on the floor, and Emily standing there, panting, blood running down her hand. "Okay," Emily replied, her voice hoarse. She picked up Kane's gun and checked his pockets, finding a small USB drive that fell out. "Hawk will want this," she said, slipping it into her pocket. "Take it to Anna and Cooper." Stone nodded, signaling for the team to tie Kane up. Emily stepped outside, the cold fog wrapping around her. The sound of waves crashing from the beach half a mile away echoed steadily, a reminder that she had won not just for herself, but for Harbor's Edge. But as she looked down at her trembling hands and the bloodstains on her shirt, she knew the price of this victory was steep. Kane had paid the price, but the battle with the Iron Vipers in Grayson was far from over. The brilliant sunrise envelopes Harbor's Edge, chasing away the thick fog that had shrouded the small coastal town in California for days. The sun rises from Pacific horizon, casting a soft golden light on Main Street, making the droplets of dew still clinging to the rooftops and cobblestone sidewalk sparkle. Inside Thompson's diner, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked apple pie fills the air, bringing a sense of peace that the town has been missing for far too long. Emily Carter sits at a table near the window, a bandage wrapped around her left shoulder, where Marcus Kane's bullet grazed her the night before. Her blue eyes are weary but shine with relief. Kane has been captured, his crew is dismantled, and Harbor's Edge stands strong. Grace Thompson stepped forward, placing a steaming cup of coffee and a plate of apple pie in front of Emily. "You look like you need this more than I do," she said, her voice warm yet tinged with concern. "I couldn't sleep last night, just thinking about you alone in that storage room with that jerk. Are you really okay, Emily?" Emily smiled faintly, a smile that held a rare warmth amidst the new and old scars. "I'm fine, Grace," she replied, taking a sip of coffee, the familiar bitterness sharpening her senses. Kane is no longer a threat. Stone and the Silver Hawks handed him over to Anna and Sheriff Cooper. "We have a USB drive from his bag. Hawk said it contains a list of clients, locations enough to take down his network all the way to San Diego." Grace sat down across from him, her hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. "So is it all over?" she asked, her brown eyes lighting up with hope. "The Iron Vipers, Grace, and everything?" Emily nodded slowly, her gaze drifting out to Main Street, where a few townsfolk were starting to appear. Fisherman Sam pushing a cart, Mrs. Helen opening the grocery store, and young Jimmy biking by delivering newspapers. "Almost done," she said. "Eddie Malone and Tommy Hayes were caught by the Silver Hawks this morning while trying to escape along the coastal road. about 5 miles out of town. Anna is interrogating them with evidence from the warehouse in your ledger. Grayson has nowhere to run. Cooper has alerted the FBI, and they're on their way. Grace let out a sigh of relief, her hands relaxing. "Oh my God, I can't believe it," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I thought Harbor's Edge was done for, but you, Anna, Stone, and all the people, we did it." Emily placed her hand on Grace's, her voice low but sincere. "It's not just me, it's all of us," she said. "You lit the first flame, Grace. Jimmy, Helen, Sam, Mary, Pete, they stood up for you, for this town. I'm just the one holding the gun, but you all are the heart." The bell on the door jingled as Anna Lopez walked in, her police uniform wrinkled but her bright brown eyes shining with determination. "Malone and Hayes are singing like canaries," she said, her tone laced with a hint of humor. "They're saying Grayson took money from Kane through a multi-million-dollar shell company to turn the port into a smuggling hub. Cooper just handed Grayson over to the FBI. They picked him up at his house an hour ago, 2 miles down Oak Street." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "Good," she said. "Hawk will use the USB drive to trace Kane's network, not just in Harbor's Edge, but along the West Coast. This isn't just our victory. It's the beginning of saving other towns." Anna sat down next to Emily, holding a cup of coffee that Grace had just poured. "You know, Carter," she said, her voice low but warm, "I didn't believe you at first when a stranger showed up and took down the Iron Vipers like something out of a movie. But now I get it. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for all of us." Emily looked at Anna, then at Grace, memories of Singapore where she lost Jackson, and Lopez flooding back. But this time it wasn't the crushing pain. "I started because of them," she admitted, her voice soft. "But Harbor's Edge gave me a new reason, a place worth protecting, a community worth fighting for. I never expected it would lead me here." The sound of a motorcycle engine roared in from a distance, about 500 feet from the bar. Stone walked in, his leather jacket caked in dust, his large hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Kane is on his way to San Francisco with the FBI," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Silverhawks picked up 5 more Iron Vipers trying to escape near the fish market. We handed them all over to Lopez and Cooper. The town is clean now, Carter." Emily stood up and walked over to shake Stone's hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "The Silverhawks aren't just soldiers. You are protectors. Harbor's Edge owes you." Stone scoffed, a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "We don't like scumbags like Kane, plain and simple. But you've turned this town into something worth fighting for." Grace stood up, carrying another plate of apple pie. "Sit down, Stone," she said, her tone playful. "You need to eat. No one's going to protect the town on an empty stomach." Laughter erupted, breaking the lingering tension in the air. Emily sat back, gazing out the window. The people of Harbor's Edge were slowly returning to their lives, no longer living in fear, no longer silent. But as she took another sip of her coffee, the satellite phone in her pocket buzzed. She pulled it out, and a message from Hawk appeared on the screen. "Kane is just a part of a larger network, from Eureka to Astoria. Do you want to continue?" Emily looked at Grace, Anna, and Stone, then out at Main Street, a town that had been revived thanks to her and the community. She smiled, feeling a genuine sense of relief for the first time in years. "Harbor's Edge is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. Now it's time to take it further. She knew her personal journey had come to an end, but a greater mission was just beginning. The afternoon at Harbor's Edge brought warm sunshine, chasing away the damp chill of the previous days, as if nature itself was celebrating the victory of the small coastal town in California. Inside Thompson's diner, the atmosphere buzzed more than usual. Grace Thompson was busy behind the counter, pouring coffee and serving apple pie to a group of locals who had just come from a meeting. Jimmy, Helen, Sam, Mary, and Pete. Emily Carter sat at a table near the window, her left shoulder now freshly bandaged, holding a secure satellite phone, her blue eyes scanning a message from Daniel Hawk Reynolds. "Kane is just part of a larger network, from Eureka to Astoria. Do you want to continue?" Anna Lopez walked in, now dressed in a simple black jacket instead of her police uniform, a faint smile appearing on her lips as she sat down next to Emily. "The FBI just left," she said, her voice low but tinged with excitement. They took Grayson, Kane, Malone, and Hayes up to San Francisco. All the evidence from locker number 3 and Grace's notebook has been handed over. Cooper is in shock. He didn't expect us to pull it off. Emily nodded, her eyes lighting up as she looked at Anna. He's not the only one, she replied, her voice soft yet firm. Harbor's Edge can do it because of you all, not just me or the Silverhawks, but the entire community. But she paused, gripping her phone tightly, her gaze distant as if she were looking through a window to a much broader horizon. Grace stepped forward and placed a cup of coffee in front of Anna. But what is it, Emily? She asked, her brown eyes filled with concern yet curiosity. I see that look in your eyes, just like when you decided to confront Kane. Is something wrong? Emily took a sip of her coffee, then set the cup down, her voice dropping as she raised her phone. Hawk sent this message this morning, she said. Kane isn't the top dog. He's just a link in the chain. His smuggling network stretches from Eureka, 100 miles north, all the way to Astoria in Oregon, another 200 miles beyond that. They target small, isolated towns like Harbor's Edge, easy to bribe, easy to control. We stopped him here, but other places are still at risk. Anna furrowed her brow, lightly tapping her fingers on the table. You mean we're not done? She asked, her voice tinged with a hint of surprise. I thought after Kane, we could finally breathe easy for at least a few weeks. Emily smiled faintly, a smile tinged with the bitterness of someone who once thought victory was the end, only to realize it was just the beginning. I wish it were that simple, she said. But I've seen it in Singapore taking down a guy like Kane doesn't cut the roots. Other towns like Eureka, Astoria, they don't have Grace. They don't have Silverhawks. They don't have us. They need someone to stand up, just like we did. Grace sat down, her hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. Are you really going to leave, Emily? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. Harbor's Edge has just found peace again, and I don't want to lose you. Emily placed her hand on Grace's, her gaze softening. I'm not leaving Harbor's Edge, she said, her voice sincere. This is my home now, you, Anna, Stone, everyone. But I can't just sit back knowing that other places are suffering like we once did. I want to take what we've learned here, our unity, our wisdom, and bring it there. Stone walked in, his leather jacket covered in dust, the sound of his boots clattering on the wooden floor. Silverhawks got word from Eureka, he said, his voice gravelly. A new gang, the Night Reapers, is shaking down the locals for protection money, just like the Iron Vipers did in the beginning. If you're serious, Carter will stand with you to make sure those bastards don't win again. Anna tilted her head, her brown eyes shining with curiosity mixed with determination. Do you want to turn this into something bigger? She asked. Not just Harbor's Edge, but the whole coastline. Emily nodded, her eyes blazing with a new vision. That's right, she said. We have the Silverhawks, veterans who know how to fight. We have Anna and Cooper, the law on our side. We have Grace and the community, eyes and ears everywhere. And we have me, with my experience from the Navy. We're not just protecting a town, we can protect it all. Grace took a deep breath and nodded slowly. I don't like seeing you go, she said, but I understand. If you need me, I'll call the others Helen, Sam, Mary. We'll keep an eye on things from here and send you any news we hear. Anna stood up, her hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. I'll talk to Cooper, she said. He won't be happy, but I'll get him involved, even if it's just with logistics. But what else do you need, Carter? Emily looked out the window, where Main Street was now bustling with people no longer afraid, no longer silent. I need Hawk, she said. He has a satellite. He's in touch with the DIA. If we're going to do this, we need accurate and quick information. She picked up her phone and texted Hawk. I'm moving forward. Send me everything about Eureka and Astoria. We won't let them lose. Stone nodded, his gray eyes shining with admiration. The Silverhawks are ready, he said. 15 people. But I can call in more from the other town's veterans from all over the West Coast. You lead the way and we'll follow. Emily stood up, pulling her coat tighter around herself, even though the pain in her shoulder still throbbed. Good, she said. We'll start from Eureka, 100 miles away, about a 2-hour drive. I'll meet Hawk through the secure channel tonight. Anna, get ready with Cooper. Grace, keep Harbor's Edge secure. This is our base. Grace smiled, her eyes lighting up with belief. Wherever you go, my coffee will follow, she said, her tone playful yet sincere. Emily stepped out the door, followed closely by Anna and Stone. The ocean breeze blew fiercely, carrying the salty scent from the Pacific. She glanced back at Thompson's diner, where it all began with 2 iron vipers causing trouble, now transformed into the heart of a grand mission. Her personal journey with Kane had come to an end, but new wind, the wind of unity and protection, was spreading far and wide, from Harbor's Edge to other shores. As the sun sets over Harbor's Edge, it paints the sky above the Pacific in vibrant shades of orange, reflecting on the shimmering water half a mile from Main Street. Inside Thompson's diner, the soft yellow lights cast a warm glow over a group still gathered. Grace Thompson stands behind the counter, coffee pot in hand. Anna Lopez sits at a large table, checking messages from Sheriff Cooper. Stone leans against the wall, his large arms crossed over his chest, his gray eyes gazing out the window. Emily Carter stands in the middle of the room, a denim jacket draped casually over her shoulders, the bandage on her left shoulder now stained with bitter blood after a long day of preparations. The satellite phone in her hand lights up with a new message from Daniel Hawk Reynolds. Eureka confirms the Night Reapers are active, sending you data tonight. Emily looked up, her voice strong yet warm. Hawk has agreed, she said, her blue eyes sweeping over everyone. We have information that the Eureka Night Reapers are doing the same thing the Iron Vipers used to do here. I'll be going tonight, along with Stone and Silver Hawks. Anna, you stay in touch with Cooper. We'll need official law enforcement when we get there. Anna nodded, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets. I'll be ready, she said. Cooper doesn't like this, but he owes us. I'll make sure he supports us from a distance. Grace stepped forward, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder, her brown eyes shining with a mix of trust and worry. Just remember, come back, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Harbor's Edge is your home, and we'll keep it safe for you. Emily smiled, placing her hand on Grace's. I promise, she said. You are the heart of this place, Grace. Keep that notebook ready. We'll need it for Eureka, Astoria, and wherever we go next. Stone stepped closer, his deep voice resonating. The Silver Hawks have assembled 15 people, and the truck is fully fueled. We'll be leaving in an hour, heading to Eureka, 100 miles away, before midnight. Emily nodded, her eyes blazing with a mission that went beyond herself. Good, she said. Harbor's Edge taught me that one person can start something, but only the community can win. We're taking that to Eureka and beyond. She stepped out the door, with Anna and Stone following behind, leaving Grace standing there with a faint smile. Outside, the ocean breeze blew fiercely, carrying the steady sound of waves crashing. Emily glanced back at Thompson's diner, where her personal journey with Marcus Kane had come to an end and a grand mission was just beginning. From a woman seeking peace, she had now become the guiding wind, inspiring others to rise up. Eureka was the next destination, but she knew this wasn't the end. It was merely a new chapter in the fight to protect small towns like Harbor's Edge, where the power community could change everything. Night fell along the west coast of California, and the ocean breeze from the Pacific whipped through Highway 101, bringing a bone-chilling cold as Emily Carter and Stone led the Silver Hawks out of Harbor's Edge. 5 Harley-Davidsons roared, their headlights slicing through thick fog, heading toward Eureka, a small town 100 miles north, where the Night Reapers were starting to spread fear, just like the Iron Vipers had done in Harbor's Edge. Emily sat behind the wheel of a pickup truck borrowed from Pete, the town's mechanic, her left hand still throbbing from the wound inflicted by Marcus Kane, but her green eyes blazed with determination. Next to her, Stone checked an AR-15, his gravelly voice cutting to the engine noise. Has Hawk sent anything about Eureka yet? Emily nodded, her right hand pulling a satellite phone from the pocket of her denim jacket. Last night, she replied, her voice low but steady. The Night Reapers have 20 guys, not as big as Kane's crew, but they're aggressive. They're shaking down the locals for protection money. controlling that small port over there. Hawk mentioned there were unmarked trucks showing up near the warehouse last week, just like at Harbor's Edge. She took a sip of coffee from the cup Grace had packed for her before she left, the bitter taste helping to wake her up after 2 hours of driving. Stone smirked, his gray eyes glinting. "Are they learning from Kane?" he asked. "If so, they won't see us coming Silver Hawks and a former Navy commander." Emily gave a faint smile, one that carried a sharpness from having faced off against people like the Night Reapers. "They won't see the whole community coming," she said. "Anna is in touch with the local police in Eureka. They're scared. But if we do it like we did at Harbor's Edge, they'll step up." Grace also sent word. She called a friend in Eureka, a diner owner named Clara, who's ready to help us just like Grace did. The convoy stopped at a gas station 10 miles from Eureka, the neon lights flickering in the darkness. Emily stepped out, the cold wind hitting her face as she signaled for Stone and the 15 Silver Hawks to gather around. "Listen up," she said, her voice ringing out like a commander on a battleship. "The Night Reapers think Eureka belongs to them, and they're dead wrong. We're going to do this like we did at Harbor's Edge. The Silver Hawks will create a distraction on the west side of the port, 1,000 feet from the main stash. I'll sneak in from the south with 2 others to gather evidence and mark the targets. Once the townsfolk get involved, we'll lock them down." A Silver Hawks ranger, a former Delta Force operative with salt and pepper hair, spoke up. "Do they have heavy weapons? I don't want a repeat of what happened at Site 3, without enough firepower." Emily nodded, her gaze locked onto Ranger. "Hawks said they have rifles and a few shotguns that aren't as heavy as Kane, but they're enough to cause trouble. We won't go in head-on. We'll strike fast and smart. Anna will call the Eureka sheriff when we have the evidence." Stone patted Ranger on the shoulder, his voice low. "We've been through Afghanistan. These guys are nothing. Carter is leading the way. We follow." The convoy continued, arriving in Eureka at 11 p.m. The small town was wrapped in silence, with only a few lights from the wooden houses along Humboldt Street flickering through the fog. Emily led Stone and 2 Silver Hawks Rangers, along with a young gunslinger named Jake, to Clara's diner, just 500 feet from the Eureka docks. Clara, a woman in her 50s with her silver hair pulled back, opened the back door, her brown eyes filled with worry yet resolute. "Grace called me this afternoon," she said in a soft voice. "The Night Reapers are pressuring my diner for money. I saw their truck at the docks last week, carrying unmarked crates." Emily shook Clara's hand, her voice warm yet firm. "Thank you for stepping up," she said. "We need information on the location, the numbers, anything you know. Harbor's Edge has won, and Eureka will win too." Clara nodded and led them into the kitchen, where a small notebook lay on the table. "I've written it down here," she said. 3 trucks, 8 guys every night, 2 people guarding the east warehouse. They come at midnight. Emily looked at the notebook, her eyes lighting up. "Awesome," she said. "Clara, you need to call the people you trust, just like Grace did. When we have the evidence, they need to step up." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly but her gaze steady. The clock struck 11:45 p.m. as Emily, Ranger, and Jake left the bar, heading south toward the docks, 300 feet away from a main warehouse. The roar of the Silver Hawks' engines echoed from the west, right on time, drawing the attention of the Night Reapers. Emily crouched behind a shipping container, her green eyes watching as 4 Night Reapers burst out of the warehouse, rifles in hand, shouting into their walkie-talkies. "They're on the West Road." Emily signaled to Ranger and Jake. "Now," she whispered. They sneaked into the warehouse, the fog concealing their figures. The journey from Harbor's Edge had brought her here, and Eureka would be the proof that the fire she ignited would never go out. Inside the main warehouse of the Eureka port, a cold and damp atmosphere enveloped the space, the smell of machine oil and rotting wood hitting Emily Carter's nose as she, along with Ranger and Jake, sneaked in through the southern door. The light from a few hanging bulbs flickered weakly, illuminating wooden crates stacked up to 12 feet high, just like what she had seen in warehouse number 3 at Harbor's Edge. The roar of a Harley-Davidson engine from the Silver Hawks still rumbled from the west, 1,000 feet away from the warehouse, accompanied by the angry shouts of the Night Reapers. "They're on the West Road." "Stop them," Emily signaled for Ranger and Jake to crouch low, her sharp blue eyes scanning the darkness, her grip tightening around the Glock 19. "Come on," she whispered, her voice low but sharp like a commander on the battlefield. "We have 10 minutes before the Night Reapers realize this is a trap." Ranger, with his Delta Force experience, nodded, pulling a small camera from his leather jacket pocket, starting to snap pictures of the crates slightly ajar, revealing M4 rifles, shotguns, and neatly stacked boxes of ammunition. Jake, the young sharpshooter from the Silverhawks, stood guard near the door, his gaze tense yet resolute. The Ranger frowned, his voice hoarse as he said, "Military gear isn't cheap black market stuff. These guys have big backing, like Kane." He snapped a few more shots, the flash lighting up the darkness. Emily nodded, her hand opening a smaller box, discovering shipping documents with an invoice marked Night Reapers Eureka Port and a familiar name, San Francisco Exports, the front company Marcus Kane had once used. "They really learned from Kane," she said, stuffing the papers into her denim jacket pocket. "But they haven't learned a lesson from Harbor's Edge." She picked up a shotgun, checked the serial number, then set it back down. This evidence would be enough to ensure the Eureka sheriff couldn't turn a blind eye. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the east door, just 50 feet away. "Check the storage," a Night Reaper shouted over the walkie-talkie, his voice filled with suspicion. "The Silverhawks aren't attacking, something's off." Emily signaled to Ranger and Jake to crouch behind the crates, her hand gripping the Glock tightly, her breathing steady even though her heart raced. 3 Night Reapers entered, rifles at the ready, flashlights sweeping through every corner. Emily took a deep breath, memories from Storage Unit 3 at Harbor's Edge flooding back as she faced Kane, and she wasn't about to let the Night Reapers win here. As the flashlight beam swept close, just 10 feet away, she tossed a small piece of metal toward the opposite corner. The clink, echoing, made the 3 guys jump and turn around. "Over there," the guy with the flashlight shouted, and all 3 rushed toward the sound. "Now," Emily whispered, darting out of her hiding spot. She fired 2 shots from her Glock, hitting the nearest guy in the shoulder and leg, causing him to fall down, groaning. Ranger charged at the second guy, smashing the butt of his gun into his head, taking him down in an instant. Jake, quick but inexperienced, struggled with the third guy, getting punched in the face before Emily rushed in, delivering a hard kick to the guy's knee, making him buckle. She aimed her gun at his head, her voice icy. "Stay down or die." The Night Reaper gasped, raising his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot," he shouted, his voice trembling. Emily signaled for Ranger to tie him up, then turned to Jake, wiping the blood from his nose. "Are you okay?" she asked, her tone softening. Jake nodded, a faint smile appearing on his lips. "It's okay, getting punched the first time and still being alive." The walkie-talkie of the guy who was tied up crackled to life. "Where's the cold storage? Report now." Emily picked up the device, pressed a button, her voice cold and steady. "The cold storage is done. You guys lose." She slammed the device down on the floor, her eyes lighting up as she looked at Ranger. "Call Stone and tell them to keep those guys outside busy a little longer. We need Clara." They left the warehouse and ran back to Clara's diner, which was 500 feet from the dock. As they pushed the back door, Clara was waiting with 3 Eureka locals, a fisherman named Hank, a mechanic named Bill, and a young mother named Lisa. "I called them right after you left," Clara said, her voice trembling yet firm. "They saw the truck, saw the Night Reapers threatening us, and they want to put an end to this." Emily placed the paperwork and camera on the table, her bright blue eyes blazing. "This is the evidence of the weapon, the invoice linking the Night Reapers to San Francisco," she said. "I need you all to stand up like Harbor's Edge did. Tell what you saw. Put pressure on the chief of police. We're going to lock these guys up." Hank, a fisherman with callous hands, nodded. "If they threaten my boat, I'll speak up." Lisa, holding her little one, her gaze fierce. "They're forcing me to pay, and I won't let my child live in fear." The sound of Silverhawk's engines grew closer, and Stone rushed into the bar, his voice low. "The Night Reapers are in disarray, but there are more trucks coming in from the north, 2 miles out. We need to move fast." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with determination. Clara, call the sheriff and bring them the evidence. Stone, keep the Night Reapers busy. Eureka won't lose not tonight. She stepped outside, the cold fog wrapping around her, but the fire from Harbor's Edge had now ignited here a different community rising up, and she knew victory was just a matter of time. The night in Eureka gradually gave way to the faint light of dawn as the first rays of sunshine from the Pacific pierced through the thick fog, casting a gentle golden hue over the small harbor. Inside Clara's diner, just 500 feet from the main warehouse, the tense atmosphere of a few hours earlier had shifted to one of relief mixed with joy. Emily Carter sat at a table in the middle of the diner, a bandage on her left shoulder stained with a bit more blood after a battle with the Night Reapers, but her green eyes sparkled with satisfaction. In front of her lay a camera and paperwork from the evidence locker, irrefutable proof of the Night Reapers' crimes. Clara stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for the group of Eureka residents Hank, Bill, and Lisa, who had just stood up to share their stories with the local sheriff. Stone walked in, his leather jacket covered in dust, his voice deep and gravelly. The Night Reapers are done for. The Silver Hawks caught 12 guys out by the docks, and the rest scattered when the cops showed up. A truck coming from the north, 2 miles away, got stopped by the sheriff's patrol thanks to Lopez calling from Harbor's Edge. Emily nodded, taking a sip of the coffee Clara had just brought over, the familiar bitterness waking her up a bit more. Good, she said, her gaze drifting from Stone to Clara. Anna did well with Cooper, and she kept her word. What about Sheriff Eureka? Clara smiled, feeling a sense of relief for the first time that night. He's coming at 2 a.m., she said, her voice soft but firm. Hank, Bill, Lisa, we're giving him the evidence you gathered and telling him what the Night Reapers have been doing threatening Hank's boat, smashing Bill's car, extorting Lisa. He can't turn his back. He needs to call in the patrol and start taking them down right away. Hank, a fisherman with calloused hands, nodded, his eyes lighting up. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, he admitted. But when Clara said she came from Harbor's Edge, where the Iron Vipers were taken down, I thought, if they can do it, we can too. Lisa, holding her little one close, her gaze fierce. I want my child to grow up without fear. You're giving us that chance. Emily set her coffee cup down, her gaze softening as she looked at the people of Eureka. It's not me, she said, her voice low but warm. It's you all who are standing up, just like Harbor's Edge has done. I'm just bringing the spark to help it ignite. She turned to Stone, a faint smile appearing on her lips. And the Silverhawks are keeping it from going out. Stone smirked, his gray eyes glinting with admiration. You lead the way, Carter, he said. We'll just handle the noise. The doorbell jingled as Ranger and Jake walked in, dragging along a tied-up Night Reaper's leader, his scarred face twisted in panic. He talked, Ranger said, his voice rough. The Night Reapers are working for someone in San Francisco, not Kane, but his replacement. He said there are 3 more towns on the list: Astoria, Crescent City, Brookings. Emily stood up, her bright blue eyes blazing with a mission that extended far beyond Harbor's Edge or Eureka. Hawk needs to know about this, she said, pulling a satellite phone from her jacket pocket. She quickly typed, Eureka wins, Night Reapers are down. Send data for Astoria, Crescent City, Brookings. We're not done yet. As the message went out, she turned back to group, her voice ringing out like a vow. We're not stopping here. Other towns need us just like Eureka needs us tonight. Clara stepped forward, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder. You made it at Harbor's Edge, now it's Eureka, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I'll keep this place open whenever you need it. Just call. We'll be watching over you, just like Grace. Emily shook Clara's hand, her eyes shining with hope. Thank you, she said. Eureka is proof that we can win, not with guns, but with people standing together. Stone patted Ranger and Jake on the shoulder, signaling them to leave. The Silverhawks are taking a day off, he said. Then we're heading to Astoria, 150 miles away. Are you ready? Emily nodded, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Ready, she replied. But this time, we're not going alone. Harbor's Edge, Eureka, everyone will be with us. As they stepped outside, the brilliant rays of the dawn sun illuminated the Eureka Harbor, where the police were escorting the last of the night reapers. The townsfolk began to emerge onto Humboldt Street, no longer afraid, no longer silent. Emily glanced back at Clara's diner, the place where the spirit of the community had ignited, much like Thompson's diner 100 miles away. Her phone buzzed with a message from Anna. "Harbor's Edge is proud of you. Cooper is sending a support team to Astoria when you're ready." Emily smiled, feeling a genuine sense of peace for the first time in years. Grace was right, she whispered to herself, recalling the words of the cafe owner. The fire never goes out. From a woman seeking tranquility at Harbor's Edge, she had now become a beacon for a protective network not just for Eureka, but for Astoria, Crescent City, Brookings, and beyond. The journey began with two troublemaking iron vipers that had brought her to this hopeful conclusion and an open future. She got in the car, with Stone and Silver Hawks following behind. The engine roared to life as they left Eureka. The dawn ahead promised new battles, but this time she wasn't afraid because she knew that with each town that rose up, that fire would burn brighter, stronger, and nothing could extinguish it. Thank you for joining us on the emotional journey of Emily Carter and Harbor's Edge on the Legendary Narratives channel. From a quiet cup of coffee to a blazing fire that saved an entire town, this story is not just about triumph over the Iron Vipers or Marcus Kane. It's a testament that when ordinary people rise up, nothing is impossible. If your heart is moved by the power of community, please hit like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next inspiring stories. We are grateful for every moment you spend here, sharing tears, laughter, and believing in the magic of courage. We'll see you in the next video. Stay tough, stay proud, and see you soon